Good evening, all. It is September 11th, 2017. All members of the Board of Selectmen are here and back. Welcome back to my colleagues. Hopefully, those of you who I haven't seen for a little while had a good summer. It's good to have everybody back and firing on all cylinders this evening. If I could ask everyone present here this evening to stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It has, it's been a hell of a couple weeks in America. Harvey and Irma have affected thousands of people in the South. And regrettably, I guess many dozens, and I'm not sure what the count is, across those two storms have perished. With that in mind, and of course, with today being September 11th, the 16th anniversary of the tragedies that took place in New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, I would ask everyone in the sound of my voice, and hopefully at home as well, to pause for a brief moment in silent reflection in honor of those. Thank you all. Moving on with our business of the evening, we have Treasury warrants to approve, 7, 7A, 8, 8A, 9, 9A, 10, and 10A. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? I hear none. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. We have a couple of sets of minutes to review and approve. The minutes of May 23rd, 2017. We'll take them up individually if that's okay with everybody. So for May 23rd, do I have a motion?
So moved. Seconded.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. The minutes of June 12th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. Minutes of June 26th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded by Greg. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you. And lastly, the minutes of July 17th, 2017. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Made and seconded by Mr. Kara. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you all. Thank you, Beverly, for your prudent timing on getting those minutes to us. Our 7 o'clock scheduled appointment at 7:05 right now is with Mr. Daniel Woods, 4982 Building Association Incorporated, doing business as the Knights of Columbus, with regards to a request to change the manager from William B. Liston to Daniel E. Woods, and to change the officers and directors. Mr. Woods, are you in the room this evening? Wonderful. So do you want to just highlight us briefly with regards to what all took place and what the request is this evening? Certainly, please. I'm sorry. Yeah, join us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
It was brought to our attention, the Board of Directors with the Wilmington Knights of Columbus, that the last transition phase in terms of the securing of the liquor license, that the paperwork was not fully processed. So that was brought to our board's attention, say about a month ago. So me being the Grand Knight and also serving as a board member, opted to refile the necessary paperwork with the Commonwealth as well as Wilmington, Mass. So that paperwork has been filed, and tonight I'm just here to officially, I guess, be recognized to be in accordance with the liquor license.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Jeff, do you have, if you want to highlight any additional details for our attention or recommendations, if there are any?
It is pretty much as described. Mr. Liston is no longer serving as the manager. The chief has reviewed The application recommends approval. And there are 2 documents for the board to sign, one being the alcohol license, the other being the local licensing authority review record, which will authorize the change in manager.
Very well. Are there additional steps now, assuming we approve this and sign these documents, are there additional steps that they need to take with the state? Or have you gotten the documentation that is prepared for ABCC?
I've received an acknowledgement of the
Okay.
paperwork that I filed online. I don't
Yeah.
have that paperwork with me, but I haven't, this was probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, so I haven't heard anything good, bad, or indifferent to suggest that I have not followed the process.
Okay, good. So any questions from members of the board?
I was just
Go ahead,
saying, Michael Woods, the outstanding people, good families in the town. They've been around forever, so I don't have a problem issuing the license. And I know you'll do fine.
Thank you. Anyone else? Very well. So I guess, do we take up 2 separate motions, Jeff, to approve, or one motion?
I think
to approve
one
both
motion is
documents?
sufficient, yes.
So I would accept a motion then to approve this request and sign these documents.
So moved.
We have that motion
Yes.
I'll second that.
and a second. Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to abstain, having worked at the Knights of Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Bendel. I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I see none. All in favor? It's 4 with 1 abstention. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll sign these off. Instructions for them, do they,
They can contact Beverly tomorrow, and they will be squared away.
right on? Thank you, guys, for coming.
Thank you
Appreciate you
very
being here.
Good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Got a little bit of paperwork flying around here. So we're a little, well, no, you know what, we're right on, so we'll just blaze forward here. Our 7:10 scheduled appointment is for the introduction of our new substance abuse coordinator, Samantha Reef. This is something I know, well, I shouldn't speak for anybody. I'll speak for myself. I'm delighted that we have the opportunity to visit with Ms. Reef. I know Chief Pagonis is sitting with us this evening. We're glad to see you again, Chief. And so we'll really just turn the table over to you folks. I don't know if, Chief, you want to sort of start with formal introductions, or if, Jeff, you wanted to take that role, and then we'll look forward to hearing from Samantha.
Well, certainly, let me just start by saying Samantha has been a great addition to the town's team. As you know, it's been a bit of a struggle in terms of the process that we've gone through to get to this point, but I'm certainly confident that with Samantha's skills and background, we'll begin to address the issue of substance abuse and mental health to a greater degree than we've been able to this point. There's certainly no one individual that's going to be able to solve the problem, but with Samantha's assistance in working with the police department, elderly services, veterans, we will, I think, make some positive inroads. So I would just turn it over to the chief.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi,
I've
Chief.
been waiting for this day for a long time. Good evening. Obviously, today's a very important day, I think, for the town of Wilmington. We've been talking about some of the concerns and issues that we've had over the last several years relative to substance abuse and mental health. And as the police department is probably one of the departments in the forefront of that, where we're open 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We kind of have a very large exposure in being involved in that. So I think that without further ado, we've gone over what we want to do and how we want to do it, and I think that we are blessed to have a board that sees fit to move this forward with the assistance of the town manager and obviously all of my fellow department heads that have really bought into this idea of ours to take it to the next level and focus on not just the people that are afflicted, but the families that are attached to those, and try to bring a certain level of calm and peace, or maybe a little bit more understanding to the general population as well as those families involved. So with that, Samantha Reef. Samantha,
Good
the
evening.
Board of Selectmen.
Hi, Samantha.
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming me. It's an honor to be here. I'm very excited about this opportunity and for, being accepted into this position and being able, I've been here, this is going in my 3rd week, and it's exciting, and I've met some great people and made some good community connections, and I'm excited for the potential this has and the positive response that the community's already given it. I think that that's a really big piece of it, and so we're off the ground and running.
It didn't take long. Samantha came to us on her first day. We had a couple overdose deaths over the weekend. And so she was kind of thrust right into the mix of it. Really didn't have a lot of time to sit down and chat about a lot of things. But in speaking to the officers, the patrolmen and the detectives that were there with her, said that she had a very unique way about her. Walked right in, kind of sat down with some of the family members, engaged them directly, which is sometimes difficult. I would say always difficult in that type of situation. And really brought a special element that we have been yearning for with the police department, rather than come and deal with it as an enforcement officer and leaving it at that level. We're taking and bringing the personal touch to it, having a better understanding, and be able to make honest and professional referrals on and beyond that. It was funny, I took a few days off within a week of that, and she had already been out and approached and introduced herself to other folks within the town through the schools department and other agencies within the community, unsolicited, just so I think there's a lot of initiative that she brings to the table, which I'm very happy for. We communicate constantly. She works very closely with the detectives and is getting constant referrals from the police officers. Like I said before, we do have a mental health crisis in all communities, substance abuse epidemic, as it's been called as well. They're all interconnected. And I think that this is something that is really going to allow us to get to the root causes of some of these things, and maybe be able to find some short stops and address some situations like childhood trauma, things like that, and identify them better with a smoother communication between us, the school department, and all the other agencies, and looking towards a future of healthier families within the town. We're going to do everything we can with the substance abuse aspect of it, with referrals, counseling, and keeping on these people. The unique part about Wilmington is we don't wait until you've overdosed. We're looking for you before you get to that stage. We want to be there in the front end of it, communicating with you and your families, giving vital information and education and assistance for whatever the family needs at that point. It's a big job. I think that the future is bright for us as we work together with Samantha and all the other department heads. And in this step here is kind of an introduction. Our hope is to move beyond this and then look at other opportunities for, closing the gap in treatment, which is one of our biggest issues right now. We find that a lot of people go to a detox facility, and when short order they can't get into the next stage, so they're out for another week or two, and there's usually a relapse that happens, and that's a critical time because that's usually when they overdose. Closing that gap and making it more fluid, so you go from step to step to step without breaks in the middle, keeping the family in tuned and educated as to what that's all about, and relieving some of those burdens there is a critical aspect. So as we move forward in the next year, we're going to really work hard on making that transition process for the individuals a little smoother, and alleviating those gaps. I think this is a model that everyone will jump on board eventually. It's a very complicated process. Police officers were kind of generalists. So, we did the best we could for the longest period of time, and I think now with Samantha with us, we're taking it to the next level. So I really appreciate the board's consideration on this very important topic.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate your words, and Samantha, you as well. I want to give ample time to my colleagues to ask any questions and really just sort of engage with you. Really kind of our first opportunity to do so. So why don't I do that? I don't. Greg, you want to jump in? The hand went up fast.
Sure.
Greg.
Good evening, Ms. Reef. Welcome. Chief, good evening. Just have a couple comments, and if I may, just a few questions for you. One, just really excited to have you here. Obviously, I know we've had the opportunity to meet, and this is certainly a large investment that our community has made, and I think it'll be worthwhile, and so far we're very pleased. I had the chance to meet with you on your first week. I actually stopped by to see you and welcome you on your first week, and both times I went by the police department, you were out helping and meeting with somebody. So, it's very nice to see that you weren't per se setting up your desk and getting comfortable. You were actually diving in and working with residents on your first couple of days, and so I really appreciate that, and I know they do too. When we did get a chance to meet, and it was short notice, I think it was the week of, your first week, when I reached out to you to see if you would come to the 5K road race for recovery that the nice Tim Brady Foundation had put on a couple weekends ago. And she got right back to me when I reached out to her. She said, yep, sure, I'll be there. And sure enough, she was there first thing in the morning. And I thought she might come and say hello to some people. And, you know, to my surprise, I was very pleased to see she hung out for more than 5 hours. I was there for the entire race myself. And when we got back, she was still there. And she had a chance to talk with a lot of folks and introduce herself. And I really appreciate you taking the time out of your weekend and in your first week here in Wilmington to do that. And I think it went a long way with a lot of folks there that day. Excuse me. And I've also had a chance to follow up with the chief. He has nothing but great things to say about you so far. I followed up with our veterans agent. I know you've been in contact with Lou already, and he tells me that you've worked with several individuals with him, and particularly a few veterans that you've reached out to and been working with, and he really raved about how thorough you were and followed up with them, and how much he appreciated you following up and taking the time to work with those veterans, and we really appreciate that as well. Lastly, I just have a couple questions, and I think that the community might be interested in this, so if you could help me out. I know you're navigating uncharted waters here. This is a brand new position, and certainly I don't know if there's a job description for what you're doing. But I do want to ask, because I'm not an expert in addiction, but those who are telling us that one of the keys is that we need to focus on the education and prevention piece, and that's really critical. And so I wondered if you have had any contact with our school system, or if you planned on having any contact with the school system, and if there's anything we could do to help to try to get you into the schools and in front of those kids as soon as possible. So whether it's the high school, the middle school, or whatever you deem appropriate, I feel like that would be critical for us. So I didn't know if you've had any contact with the schools.
Thank you for your statements and your
Sure.
question. Actually, today I met with, there's a task force, the Behavioral Health Task Force,
Yep.
in the schools, and I was able to meet with them and invited in to be part of that task force. And there's a specific kind of group within that to focus on substance use within the schools. And so we will be focusing on kind of education and prevention, along with, you know, how it's implemented into the schools, but also how that's, you know, translated into the homes and how that's communicated with families. So it's not kind of just a siloed conversation. So that's definitely in the works and a focus of mine. Very vulnerable population, and I think it's a critical piece that both the chief and I agree is a good access point to introduce education in the system.
Great. That's great to hear. We really appreciate it. And again, welcome you to our community. I'm biased, but I think it's one of the best around. So I really appreciate you're a great addition, and we look forward to working with you. And certainly anything I can do to help, please don't feel free to reach out.
Thank you, I appreciate
you.
it.
You want to go down the line?
Sure. Samantha, it's nice to meet you this evening. It's good to hear that you're proactive, that you jumped right into to action as soon as you started. That's a good thing. It get you out and get to meet people and get to know the community and the flavor of what Wilmington is all about. So that's a great thing. But can you tell us maybe a little bit of your background so that the people know where you're coming from and how you're going to formulate what's going to take place in this department?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice meeting you also. Thank you. So I did my undergraduate studies at Syracuse University in upstate New York. I got a bachelor's of science and social work. I then got my master's from Boston University. While I was getting my master's, I had my field placement at the Somerville Police Department, where I did very similar to work to kind of what our vision is up here, working around mental health and substance abuse in the community, kind of a community model, and helping to eliminate those gaps in service, along with, you know, those crisis calls and whatnot day to day. So that really gave me a good background of what it's like in a police department, what you know, emergency responses are, and how social work and kind of this profession can play a critical role in partnering with the police department. So I'm hoping to take that and, you know, customize it to the needs of Wilmington and what this community needs, and modifying and adapting it however is appropriate.
That's great. Thank you. It's nice to meet you.
Mr.
Yeah,
McCoy?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the community. I read the article in the Lowell Sun. They did a great job when introducing you. And I know, not only a local, it's a state, it's a federal issue, and I'm sure it touches all our lives. And I'll be totally honest, I was thinking of maybe we'd have a regional individual, but I got to give credit to the chief because he convinced me in the auditorium that we could really use somebody full-time. So he sold it to me. And I know there's an issue. Incarceration's not the answer. We got to work with folks. Also, not realizing, the chief talking about it, veterans, senior citizens. I went to the senior center when the DA, Ryan, was there, talking about it as well, and working with somebody that on recovery, and they did a fantastic job. And it touches all our lives. So I'll tell you what did it for me was the chief, and I'll say it again. It was he dot the I's, crossed the T's, and I really hope to think that it's going to be well worth it. I believe it will be well worth it. If you can save 1 or 2 lives, you did your job. And it's a growing thing. It's huge. It's huge, and it's a sad situation, but yet we need to put something positive. So welcome to the community. I'm sure you do fine, and you got a good mentor right there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lowe?
Thank you. Welcome to the community, like everyone else has said, and I'm really glad to hear that Mr. Bendel asked a question about education, because we all know that is more important than after the fact. It's before the fact. And I know you mentioned, and I'm really super glad to hear that you're working with Lou and Shelley and all the other department heads, because that's very important in communication and coordination. It's important to get the community involved, not just you two sitting there, but everyone involved, us 5 or 6 gentlemen and ladies here, involved when you need us, because we are here, because I believe we all supported this position, and we're all here for you. So I'm super glad. Also, I hope you get involved. We have probably 100 or so students at the Tech, Shawshene Tech, and Mike did mention, Mr. McCoy mentioned a regional thing, and yeah, I was certainly thinking that at the same time, and I'm sure that in the future there's going to be someone in the same position at other towns around us, and you guys are going to be sharing best practices and best ideas. So welcome to the community, and if you need us, we're here for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, I guess I'm last. Samantha, the truth is, and this is no reflection on you, I wish it wasn't necessary for you to be here.
I agree.
Yeah. It's regrettable that the circumstances, not just of Wilmington, but of our society today, require your services. But boy, I'm glad we have you to perform those services. Your credentials sound impressive, and frankly, hearing about your experience in Somerville gives me peace of mind, because I had believed up until I learned that about you, that we were in some regards trailblazers in this idea of this role within the community, and hearing that you've already had a similar kind of role in another community, admittedly a larger population in a different kind of community than we are, but being able to bring that experience to us and hopefully scale it to have it make sense, and working with the Chief's Department. So that helps me feel a little bit more comforted that we're not inventing a new wheel, that there's already been a wheel that we can kind of plug in and keep rolling. The preventative nature, I think someone talked about being proactive and not being reactive. The idea that you're not sitting in the office waiting for the phone to ring that someone needs help. You're out there really interacting with folks, and hopefully identifying those folks that need help before they are in a dire need of help. And frankly, if you can have an impact that saves one life, then your existence in this town is more than well paid for. So I'm confident you'll do that, and that makes me feel very good about the decision I made. So thank you very much for being here. Thanks for taking the job, Chief. Thanks for being a mentor to her. Looking forward to the good work you'll do together.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, please, if I may, one more question. Samantha, maybe you could just let everyone, the residents know at home, if they need to get in touch with you.
Yeah.
Is it through the police department? Is that who they should reach out to?
Yeah, so my office is in the police department. I regrettably do not have my phone number memorized yet, but if you call the general police number, they can patch you up to me.
978-658-5071 is the non-emergency number. I just want to reiterate one thing. I know it's a concern of people that might think that calling the police department when you're looking for help for a loved one with a substance abuse problem is going to cause them more grief. And I'm here to tell you that that is not our mission. It's not the way we've been doing it for several years now. We want to help you. We use various methods to keep people out of that type of crisis, because crisis begets more substance abuse activity. And so the whole idea is to reduce that. We're here to help families. There is a criminal element that goes along with substance abuse. Obviously, it's illegal to buy a lot of the things that they get. They usually lie, cheat, and steal from their families in the process, and there's a lot of heartbreak for that. We've been successful in a lot of ways in working with families that have come to us in being able to recover some of that property over time, and to be able to be a shoulder to lean on in that crisis, because we have a better understanding of what substance abuse is and what it does to a family than most people. And at the end of the day, we're not looking to incarcerate certainly anyone with a substance abuse problem. We recognize it as a medical condition. I recognize it as a family disease, as I've called it that before, that the whole family is sick. And our goal is to try to bridge that gap, to make them healthier, to allow them just avenues that they can follow, to give them opportunities that they wouldn't have. It's tough to navigate through this alone. It's silent in a lot of ways, or it has been in the past because of the stigma of it. And I want people in Wilmington to recognize that, years ago, we departed from that old arrest and incarcerate model, and have followed a model where we're trying to assist and help people to get out of this, because we want a healthier family. We have a healthier family, we have a healthier individual, and we have a healthier community in general. So the whole plan is just to try to get people into services. Samantha isn't a counselor for counselor's sake to sit down and go through sessions with people. She's a resource, and through our department, able to get people into the proper services. She understands how to navigate the process so that we'll reduce the opportunity, the occurrence of gaps in that, which is one of the most important things, I think, in the long run. So at the end of the day, when you're calling, you're not getting a police officer to come respond to take an enforcement action. You're getting the services of Samantha, as well as a couple of our detectives that know all of the players, or most of the players in town, and that's a good place to be. That's a good place as a parent to be able to call up and have that resource, not only Samantha, but the police department resource, with our knowledge and understanding of what they've been going through, and our ability. We just recovered some property last week that a family member had stolen from a mother and pawned someplace. That just little bit of solace and work in conjunction is the whole total package. And I think that's what we bring that's different from other communities. And that's been our plan all along, to try to really step it up, work with other groups. Within the first week or two, she had already worked with veterans agents, senior services. Everybody's on the same team with this. So I expect that we're going to have to monitor Samantha and her workload, because it looks like it's going to get really busy. As I've said to Jeff before, like anything in community policing, when there's an outreach program, you'll see an uptick in activity, only because of the sheer fact that you're reaching out. So I think that, we're going to see a lot more things come to the surface where we're going to have to address them, and we'll be busy for a while until we make that adjustment to that. But I'm very happy to have Samantha, and we're looking forward to it. It's a really exciting program.
Thanks, Chief. Yes, Ed?
Thank you, Chief. I have one other related but not so related. Are your officers protected when they go to a call that's suspected of alcohol, of illegal drugs, opioids being, and this, any one of them? Because I just recently read a story, and I forget what part of the country it was, but where two officers were badly injured or hurt when they came upon unsuspected. Are your officers protected? That would be important to.
They are. There's,
And then just in the town crier, there was an article of a Wilmington man selling, as part of his job, a kit that to even Tewksbury Police. I was wondering if that was something that, one more thing we don't have to worry about in the future is, I'm hoping you guys are protected.
I look at those things, and we try to really, we don't want to play into mass hysteria with certain issues.
Right.
And when you look at it, the information that I had, and which has been confirmed recently through the DEA and other groups, is that rubber or the nitrile gloves are probably your best barrier at that point. If it's large quantities and it's airborne, you don't go in. Is there potential for exposure? Absolutely. But if that type of exposure happens, you're not going to have time to put on a special suit.
Right.
You're already going to be exposed to it. So what we've done is, in areas where we store narcotics as evidence and things like that, we have instituted a new program where there is nasal Narcan posted right on the walls of those locations. The evidence officers, the lieutenants that handle evidence, have it in their office, and they're not, under our new policy, to be manipulating it, touching it, bagging it, packaging it for shipment to the lab unless they have someone that is aware they're working on it and is keeping an eye on it. Only because, if you go down and out and nobody knows about it, that could be an issue. So those are some of the newer things. It's all evolving.
I'm sorry I had to ask the question, but
No,
it's
it's a very-
important, and it's like
it's a
the
very
chairman
good
said, it's a sad subject that we're even talking about it, but it's something I thought about while you were talking there. It's important that our officers and our all first responders are protected as best they can.
There's been some exposures through the DEA on type of dynamic entry raids where it's gone airborne. And of course, you're ingesting it like you would if you were snorting it. So there have been some officers that have had ill effects from the exposure to different, mostly the fentanyl. But just in front of you, handling it with rubber gloves and trying to keep it packaged, they're saying that the exposure is reduced. You're not going to absorb it directly through the skin. They have fentanyl patches, but there's a special compound in that allows that to permeate through your skin, which isn't present in the stuff that they're cooking up in various locations throughout North Middlesex County.
Thank you for your due diligence, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else? Everyone else? Wonderful. Samantha, again, thank you. Good luck. Let us know if we can support you in any other way. Chief, thanks for being here this evening.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we blocked off 10 minutes for that discussion, and it took a little strong of 20. I anticipate.
That's how important this discussion is.
Indeed. When we looked at the agenda last week, Jeff and I looked at that and said, you know what, I think that's probably gonna go long, but you know what? Certainly didn't want to rush that conversation, and I'm glad we had it. We have a 7:20 scheduled appointment with as an introduction again, to a new conservation agent, Mr. Ryan Hale. Jeff, you want to grab the ball?
Yes, Ryan is our new conservation agent. He's been with us now for a few weeks. He is well-schooled in wetlands law. He has a degree from, is it Syracuse? I'm sorry, University of New York, Syracuse, correct?
The longest college name in history.
Right. But one of the things that I find particularly advantageous, quite frankly, is that he has been working for a number of years, 13 years, in the private sector. So he works with companies that are, or has worked with companies who are looking to develop particular areas and kind of sits on the other side of the table when it comes to the permitting process. So I think having that perspective now in his new role will be advantageous because he'll be able to view the issues from multiple perspectives. So we're glad to have him on board, and there's certainly going to be a lot of work that he'll be involved in.
Great. I see our planning director, Valerie, is with us this evening. Valerie, I'm going to say hello to you because I think you're going to say introduce us to Ryan. So if you want to grab the ball here, go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Here to introduce Ryan. Like Jeff said, he has 13 years of experience in the private sector. He's has great technical skills. He can identify wetlands very easily, very good at it. He's shown that he can weed through the wetland regulations. But what impresses me the most about Ryan is he can effectively communicate. He's a great communicator, and has a kind of a problem-solving knack, and which is much appreciated. And he's a great addition to the team, along with the day-to-day tasks of supporting the Conservation Commission, reviewing applications, site visits, advising applicants, residents. He'll be working on some longer-term efforts. One of those is to provide some education for folks in town, why wetlands are important, what value they have, not just as a habitat, but economically. They have value in filtering water, they have value in, soaking up floodwaters. So there's a lot of value in those things, and I think we need to kind of communicate why they're protected and why they should be protected, and they're a resource for all of us. So we're going to do some education efforts. We're going to continue to implement the open space plan. Folks really talked about how trails are important in town, so we're going to keep focusing on those, kind of figure out some signage, some trailhead signage so you know where to enter the trail, and keep making progress on those efforts as well. So, like I said, he's a great addition to the team, and we're really happy to have him. So I don't know if you want to hear about Ryan's background?
Sure, yeah, I'm not sure who wants to take it, but yeah, we'll turn it over to Ryan as soon as that makes sense.
Well, thank you all for having me tonight. I'm not sure what else there is to say. That's pretty much a good summary of my background, but just to give you an idea of the types of things that I did in the private sector that I think kind of give me somewhat of an advantage is really seeing things from the applicant's perspective and understanding what they're applying for and why and what kind of hurdles they might have to jump over. And I kind of view the position as helping to kind of facilitate that as much as I can, obviously staying within the bounds of the law, but really trying to come up with creative solutions so that everybody benefits. The environment is protected, the applicant is getting what they need within the bounds of the law, and so that's kind of how I view my role as of now. In terms of types of projects I've worked on in the past, it's kind of all across the board, which in a community like Wilmington, there's rail, there's other types of transportation, residential, commercial developments, and I've worked on all those kind of projects before. So I think that really helps me understand where they're coming from and helps them get through the permitting process while still protecting the environment. And
Awesome.
I guess while I have the mic, speaking just to how important wetlands are in Wilmington. We're in the headwaters of the Ipswich River, which in some years actually dries up before it even reaches the ocean, which is shocking to some people. They've started removing dams along the Ipswich River for herring and other fish to come back, but if the water's not even flowing there, they're not coming back. So same with the Shawshene River, there's dams being removed to allow herring to come up, which are also in that watershed. So the quantity and the quality of water coming out of Wilmington is truly important to not just Wilmington, but everything downstream. From an ecological perspective, aesthetic perspective, fishing, all that stuff. So it's an honor to be working in a community with such important resources.
Great. I appreciate your sort of holistic view on that. That's pleasing to hear. I'm certain that my colleagues have a desire to meet you and get to know you and ask some questions. So I'll start down there, Ed, if that's all right with you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
I'm glad to hear you that in Wilmington we have a lot of water, a lot of train tracks, and a lot of Dunkin' Donuts. My experience on the Board of Appeals, the Board of Appeals relied on the Conservation Commission in some recent bylaw changes, not only and maybe some enforcement of them. We enforced them when it was a commercial building, but in the impervious levels of someone even just adding a driveway or adding a building to add an addition is important, and I know Paul was helping a lot with that, the town engineer, but glad that we've got someone with a lot of knowledge that can continue what the town's been trying to do since Valerie and others have been here, so welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to the community. As Ed described a moment ago, Ed and I really frequent Dunkin' Donuts a lot. But anyway, I just wanted to say we did, if you don't mind sharing, you said you worked in the private sector for 13 years. Do you mind sharing with us what you did in the private sector, who you worked for? Because you say that's going to benefit you as an agent.
Sure. Yeah, I work for a few different private companies.
If you want to share it, if you don't want to share it, I respect that.
Yeah, I don't mind saying. It's I think it's on the record, but AMEC was one company, TRC and Lowell. So a few different. They were mostly engineering companies, and kind of tacked onto that was the environmental side. So most of my work it was about 50% in the field, delineating wetlands and streams, doing surveys for vernal pools, threatened endangered species, stuff like that. And the other half was essentially putting together permit applications for development and things like that. So I think, I guess what I meant by that was just understanding where the applicant is coming from allows me to understand what they're applying for and how to review their project as well. You know, understanding, you know, that maybe they didn't catch this over here. This is what I would have done as an applicant previously, and maybe bringing that to light. There's been a couple instances where, you know, applicants just didn't catch things, and so I was able to convey that to them, and they were able to, you know, move things around to basically get approved.
Very good. I didn't have no specific questions, but I guess this is a great meet and greet to both individuals this evening, so thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Carr?
Yeah, welcome aboard. It's good to have you in. Seems like you have a nice background. I was wondering if you are familiar with the environmental issues that are happening with Olin and the surrounding conservation areas. And
I hope
are
to
you
hear about
gonna-
that tonight.
You're going to jump into that? I
Yeah.
know you've only been on for a couple of weeks. And
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm not familiar with it. I know tonight someone will be speaking about it, so I was
Yeah.
hoping to kind of get
so
filled
you
in
get up to
about
speed
that.
on
Yeah.
that issue
Yep.
for the residents.
Yeah.
Well, I'm good. I just welcome aboard. I'm sure that you'll be called upon quite a bit as these issues come to the forefront.
Please.
Welcome aboard, welcome to Wilmington, and we're pleased to have you. I'm very impressed by your presentation and your resume. Sounds like you'll do great work for the town, so that's great. I'm sure you know by now, but we have a tremendous amount of wetlands here in Wilmington, and we
Yeah.
value that, their importance, so I really appreciate everything you're gonna do. Do have a question. I understand that you're gonna be holding an event or heading up an event on the 23rd.
Mhm.
Perhaps you could tell the community a little bit about the cleanup day?
Yeah, so we're going to be kind of dividing and conquering and setting up some teams to go out to town-owned properties to essentially walk along the trails and clean up trash and things like that we see. It's on the 23rd. It's from 8 to 12. So we're going to meet at the DPW. It's
135.
135 Andover Street in the morning. And everybody's welcome. And if you have any questions, you know, feel free to contact our office. But it'd be great to see everybody out there.
Great, and you just mentioned if folks want to get a hold of you, it's the Planning and Conservation Committee?
Yep.
Great. I hope there'll be a great turnout there that day, and I wish you much success.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Ryan, again. Thanks for choosing Wilmington to come and begin your municipal side of your service. Certainly looking forward to putting to work your breadth of experience in the private sector. Hopefully making those applicants and applications more efficient, run through the system and the process more smoothly. But I was moved by the idea of moving forward or gaining more momentum with regards to open space plans and trail maps. And I know Valerie and I have talked about that on a number of occasions. And I think with you at the helm, or at least in the pilot in the pilot room, we can start to make some forward progress there. We have the trail maps that are up on the internet now and available, but the trails aren't really all that clearly marked, and there's some sign opportunities. And I think we've taken the first steps, but looking forward to, under your guidance and your work, to be able to take those additional next steps. So that's good stuff. Outreach and education, also great components of the role that we expect and look forward to having you play. So welcome to Wilmington. Look forward to working with you more hand in hand. And thanks, Greg, for bringing up the 23rd. Obviously, that's a tremendous opportunity for folks to come out and really kind of see our natural resources, those that you'll be caring for. So thank you. Congratulations. Welcome aboard.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Valerie. Yes.
Public hearing, so we'll vote.
Okay. Yes, thank you. So we are a little behind schedule, and I apologize for the folks that are waiting in queue for additional items on the agenda. Jim, if there is seats up here in the front, if you want, it's up to you, but we're not at you yet. Just wanted to offer you a place to sit. Mr. Mark Boudry, on behalf of Meridian Associates, this is a public hearing with regards to an earth removal permit for 375 Ballard Vale Street Mr. Boudry, I think that's you, sir, yes? All right, I see you have a map and you're taking a seat. We have some other folks that are just going to get situated, and as soon as they do, we'll jump to you if that's all right.
Take your time.
So it is a public hearing. I will, I guess, call that hearing formally open. Jeff, do you want to introduce any details here, or should I just go directly to Mr. Boudry to make his presentation?
I would suggest going to Mr.
Okay.
Beaudry.
Sir, you're on.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Mark Beaudry. I'm with Meridian Associates. I'm a professional engineer here in Massachusetts, and here representing FedEx Ground and Howland Development on a project on 375 Ballard Vale. And it's the existing FedEx Ground facility, and the site is in, besides some improvements that are being done relative to their operations, the site is also in need of some improvements to the site, to the pavement, drainage systems, et cetera, that are overdue. And going through this process, we have been working with the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission, so we have had the pleasure of working with Valerie and Ryan through this process. In fact, Conservation Commission last week approved the project and has issued an order of conditions, and we anticipate receiving a decision from the Planning Board on October 3rd. That hearing has been closed, and so we're looking forward to getting that permit in place, as well as the earth removal permit in the stormwater permit, to be able to move this project forward. It's an existing building that you may be familiar with. The actual where this kind of all started was that FedEx Ground is interested in adding a larger security building to the site that would replace the small little building that they have there now. In addition to that security building, they'll also have a small, what's called the locker shelter, that will be almost like a small little pavilion outside of the security building, outside the security area, that drivers will be able to put stuff in a locker, et cetera. But as part of that site work, basically the entire site is the pavement needs to be removed and replaced, or ground up and repaved. And as part of that work, just by the fact of grinding up the pavement, it tends to, you go from something that's 100% compact to something that's less than that, maybe 95% compacted when you're done. So you end up with what I call a fluffing of that material. So you end up with a surplus of material when you do a grinding operation of pavement. Also, there are some parts of the site, primarily in the back and a little bit of the front here, that have so little pavement base that exists there now that we have to actually excavate down and put a good quality base material in place and then repave the whole site. So that's going to result in a surplus of material for where that remove and replace occurs. Some of the material that's ground up as part of the pavement operation will be able to be used as base material, but we still anticipate that there's going to be a surplus of material. That volume is estimated to be conservatively about 4,500 cubic yards. Now, that's associated with the pavement work. Along the back of the site, at the toe of the slope here, you can see that darker line. The proposal is to add an interceptor drain under the edge of pavement. And the thinking there was, the plan is to get some of the water that might be coming off of that hill, intercept it before it gets underneath the pavement structure, and divert it into the drainage system and into the wetlands area to the south. So that drainage system installation will result in another approximately 300 cubic yards of excavation. So we're looking at a total of about 4,800 cubic yards of material that may have to be removed from the site that's incidental to construction. And so the duration that is expected for this process is about 10 days. They anticipate that to do it in 5 phases, because this is an operational facility, and we have to work, there are limited times a day where you can actually work on the site, so it'll be broken up, like large paving jobs often are, into phases. And each phase is anticipated to be about approximately 2 days long for a total of about 10 days. We don't know if that's going to be 10 consecutive days, but probably about 10 days total. And so the project has been through as I mentioned, through planning board. We've had 2 hearings there. We've been through conservation. We've responded to the town engineer Paula Looney's comments. And actually, in addition, one thing to mention, I know I'm hearing a lot about wetlands and pavement and sensitivity about that in town. Obviously, that's something very important to consider. And this work is going to result in no additional impervious cover on the site. So as part of the going through the reviews by the town with Paula Looney in particular, we wanted to see some improvements to the site in addition to that's over 20 years old, I believe, at this point. But in addition to doing the repaving, we're going to be adding 4 water quality treatment units on the site, as well as adding some recharge components to recharge the clean roof runoff before it goes out into the wetland areas. So the site is actually going to be significantly improved, not only from an aesthetic and functional standpoint, but also from a water quality standpoint. So I think it's going to be a really positive result for the town, and then be able to keep FedEx ground at this site in the town of Wilmington. So we did receive the comments earlier today from Michael Woods, your Director of Public Works, as well as Paula Looney, and the applicant has no issues with these suggested conditions of approval. The only one that I wanted to discuss with the board was the limitation that work be limited to Monday through Friday. And Paul indicated to me that was a typical kind of standard condition, but if we wanted to do something different, we should talk to the board. And so I definitely wanted to do that. And what the contractor would like to reserve the right to be able to do work on Saturdays as well. And with the thinking being that the sooner they can get in and out of there, the better. Now, one thing about FedEx is that obviously we're going to be getting soon into their really busy season. They do not allow any work on site after November 1st. So it's looking like that's going to be difficult to achieve this year as it is, because with expecting the final permits in early October, by the time appeal periods are up and getting everybody mobilized, that'll November 1st is going to be tough. But if we could get some work done before then, that'd be great. Otherwise, it'll be done in the spring. But this is in the industrial area of town. Truck traffic coming out of the site will head south down Ballard Vale to 125 right to 93. So it's not going to be going through any residential areas. It's all within the industrial area on major roads, and we think that with doing having Saturdays available, the work could get done quicker, and then be in there and be done with it. And so we would ask that consideration of the board. So that's all I have. It's all clean material, all material that's under the directly probably within 15 inches of the surface of the site right now, and I think it's going to be a win-win when this work is successfully completed. So,
Thank you, Mr. Bowden.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your presentation. I'll ask Jeff to highlight any recommendations that we've received from his department heads. Do you have that?
Yes, I
prepared,
do. I have a recommendation from Mike Woods, Public Works Director, and Paula Looney. The Department of Public Works has reviewed the application for permit to remove earth products within the town of Wilmington for the above referenced project. The application was prepared and submitted by Meridian Associates on behalf of the applicant FedEx Ground. The applicant is proposing to remove approximately 4,800 cubic yards of material from the project site to construct a new security building and locker shelter, along with the general site improvements, including paving, grading, and drainage. The majority of the excavation, including removal of failing paved surface and base course earth material directly below the wearing surface. The DPW has reviewed the application, accompanying plans and documents, recommends granting the earth removal subject to the following conditions. At the expiration of the permit, the grade shall conform substantially to the proposed grade as shown on the plans approved by the Town of Wilmington Planning Board and submitted herein or herewith. At the expiration of the permit, the entire area shall be covered with loam and seeded with a recognized grass seed of good quality, except where the area consists of paved surface. The applicant, its agents, and employees shall use due caution when entering and leaving the site. The hauling route shall be construction vehicles and equipment. For these construction vehicles and equipment shall be limited to the Ballardvale Street to 125 to Route 93. The applicant, its agents, and employees shall use extreme caution when passing school buses. The hours of hauling on ways used by the public shall be limited to Monday through Friday inclusive, and not earlier than 7 a.m. and not later than 3:30 p.m. The applicant shall agree to keep loam within the town of Wilmington whenever possible. If rock or ledge crushing operations are to be used on site, they will be limited to the hours of operation between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. Should blasting operations be needed, it shall be in accordance with all town and state laws, regulations, and policies. The applicant or their designated contractor shall install a crushed stone construction entrance at the construction vehicle exit access location. The applicant or their designated contractor is responsible for the daily cleanup of all soil materials, stones, etc., tracked along the hauling route. Periodic inspection shall be made by the engineering division to ensure that the contractor is in compliance with the conditions of the permit. The applicant or their designated contractor is responsible to limit all dust and excessive noise associated with the earth removal process. Periodic inspection shall be made by the engineering division to ensure the contractor is in compliance with the conditions of the permit. The applicant shall notify the town of his/her intentions to obtain a renewal of the permit at least 30 days before the expiration of the date of the permit. The permit is not assignable. The applicant is required to furnish a performance bond made payable to the town of Wilmington for the faithful performance of the work under the permit. The engineering division is recommending a performance bond amount of $120,000. The surety company must be located and licensed to transact business in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The applicant shall contact the engineering division of the Department of Public Works to coordinate said performance bond. In the event of any above conditions are not faithfully observed and performed, then the selectmen shall have the option to revoke the permit at any time. The only other point I would just ask is that the green cards, we would need to have those just to confirm that the abutters have been properly notified.
Mr. Hall, I neglected to bring those this evening. I can have them at the town tomorrow to your office.
Okay, that would be fine.
Thank you.
So with regard to the request for Saturday operations, unless, and I see Mr. Woods is in the audience this evening, unless there's particular concerns on their part, I would not see a particular problem in light of the fact that we're talking about an area that is, as noted, industrial and will not be impacting residential areas.
Very well.
Mr. Chair.
Just a moment, excuse me, just for just a second. You had a couple more recommendations?
Yes, recommendation from Shelley Newhouse, the Health Director, recommends approval of the earth removal permit on behalf of Meridian Associates. The building inspector, I have reviewed the application for an earth removal permit for the above property and have no outstanding zoning issues. The Planning Director, Valerie Gingrich, I recommend approval of the earth removal permit for the project located at 375 Ballardvale Street. The parking lot rehabilitation project includes water quality improvements to the stormwater management system that will improve the quality of runoff from the site. The Planning Board closed the site plan review and stormwater management public hearings for the project at their September 5th, 2017 meeting, and will issue approval decisions at their October 3rd meeting. Conservation Commission is expected to issue an order of conditions at their meeting, which was on September 6th.
And
Thank
that
you,
did
Jeff.
occur.
So, yes, thank you, Jeff, for the recommendations. We would go to the board for questions or comments, and Greg, you chimed in, so I'll go to you first.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do have a quick question before we decide on the weekend. You note here that during the week, you won't be operating any later than the times of 7 a.m. and 3:30. Would that be the same for the weekend?
Yes.
Would it be?
Definitely.
Okay. I only ask because, you know, I know it's in an industrial area, but they do have to travel close to a residential area to get there. So,
Yeah, I think they'd be coming, the contractor agreed to come off 93 and then, right up Ballardvale, so are there residential houses along that stretch? I'm not aware of any
close
here.
by, I mean, if it's
No, but
6
don't
o'clock
get
in the morning on a
93,
Saturday, you can hear it. I just
Yeah,
wanted to make sure I didn't know, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I
No,
didn't
no,
want-
no,
Okay.
no. And I think they'd even be willing to, if you wanted to move it up to 8 a.m. on Saturday, I think that would be fine too. As long as they had a window there on Saturday that they could do some work potentially.
I just bring it up because, listen, I have a 6-month-old. We don't get a lot of sleep in my house, but other people I know like to sleep in on the weekends, so.
I will, Mr. Chairman, I will say in the past, the Board of Appeals, when someone wanted to work or on Saturdays, we did bump it up to 8 a.m. That would be my recommendation to this board if we wanted to allow them to work on Saturdays.
Okay.
That's reasonable.
How many truck loads do you anticipate going in and out? And if there's damage to the road, is that going to be fixed by the?
That would be the purpose of the performance bond. If there was any damage, then the bond could cover that. But we'd probably be anticipating, probably 20-yard dump trailers, I'm guessing. So we might be looking at, 200 trucks maybe total over the course of that period. So, something like that, 200, 250.
And one follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chair. How many Saturdays are we talking about? You said this is potentially a 10-day project. We're talking about 2 Saturdays?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah, realistically.
That's it?
Yeah.
Mr. McClure?
Yeah, relative to the earth removal, are you using any kind of explosives? I would imagine.
None are anticipated. There
No?
was a pretty extensive geotechnical program done on the property. I think approximately 10 or so borings that I recall, and actually most of the site is a fill condition in the front, so we wouldn't anticipate any blasting at all. There is some area of shallow depth of rock, like that might be back in the northeast corner, but it's not within a foot of the surface, so we don't anticipate any rock excavation.
I'm familiar with Ballardvale Street, then you're gonna take a right on Route 125. You have 93 north, 93 south. The trucks, what direction are they going? South, north, both?
I think it depends on, that's a great question. The contractor hasn't gotten that precise because they might have different guys hauling, and they might be coming from different directions, but it's a good question.
So it's gonna be crystal clear that on the removal, they're gonna take a right on 125. It's either 93 north, 93 south, because we don't want anybody taking a left on 125 and taking a right on Andover Street, major residential area. But that would be, I don't have a big issue with it, but that'd be one of my big concerns, to make sure it's either 93 north, 93 south. And now if you go further, then obviously you're gonna hit more residential area.
Sure.
It's not that great, 93 north, 93 south, if you keep it to that, and,
That would be an appropriate condition of approval,
Alright.
if you wanted to write that right in.
okay. I'd have no issue with that, but that would be it. I mean, if one truck goes down Andover Street, I would hope to think we'd shut you right down. I hate to say it, but, we're talking a lot of trucks.
Yeah.
And if we can try to keep it on the highway, on the roads where it's supposed to be, I don't see an issue with that as far as I'm concerned. Thank you.
Thanks, Roy.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm really glad to hear that of the improvements for the drainage and the no more impervious ground's going to be added to the site. So it's going to be an improvement to what's there now. So super glad there. And like the previous selectman said, 93 south or north only, because he lives on one side he mentioned. I live on the other side, and we'll be looking, believe me, because we already have enough traffic, and especially heavy trucking. So we hope not to see 200 or 250 trucks on our town roads. And like I said earlier, Mr. Chairman, I would, if we're going to recommend approval for Saturday, it would start at 8 a.m.
Thank you, Ed. Everybody up here satisfied with questions so far? It is a public hearing, so I'm going to turn it over to the audience. If you would like to ask a question or make a comment on this matter, please stand and we'll recognize you. Not everybody at once now. Looks like we have no specific questions on this matter. Mr. Boudry, I guess, or Jeff, let me just ask you, I think the procedure is, I'm hearing that the recommendation is being made. Oh, I had a question, forgive me. It just popped into my head. Number 6 of the conditions was the applicant shall agree to keep loom within the town of Wilmington wherever possible. That's the good stuff that flowers grow in. Is there a mechanism, and if so, by what mechanism would you work on keeping the good stuff here in town?
Well, first of all, we don't anticipate any loam, so it's all going to be grindings from from the existing pavement areas and probably some glacial till that's along that toe. So that might be there is not going to be any, but
Okay, noted. I guess if you run across some really sweet farmland up there, put it aside and we'll talk to Mike Woods. We want to put it to use.
We don't anticipate. Nothing was hit like that in the borings. So.
All right, very well. So we have the recommendation potentially for the change of Saturday, or the addition of Saturday hours, but starting at 8 o'clock. And we have a request potentially to add a 16th condition, which is that the truckers use exclusively Route 93 north or south and do not enter into residential communities off of 125. Is that, so, I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just one more question, if I could, sir. You were talking about the 200 truckloads. Is there anything, I'm not saying there is, anything on the premises that, anything toxic at all? You talking about asphalt? Is it going to be sent at a designated place relative to any contaminants?
Yeah, we don't anticipate
If there is,
any.
I'm not saying there is.
Yep,
you know.
don't anticipate any. Typically, a lot of the pavement grindings go to the Mass DOT facilities where they
All right.
blend it into the asphalt mixes. The state allows a certain percentage of reclaimed materials into the mixes. So, or it's suitable base course material to be used on project sites. So.
All right.
There is some salvage value to it, so we'd anticipate that the site contractors, would potentially use it on other project sites.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So those 2 additional inclusions above and beyond what was already written would be, I guess, like I say, additional. Unless there's questions or comments or otherwise, I guess I would probably accept a motion to accept the request for the earth removal permit based on the conditions as set forth by the DPW, in addition to those extra conditions, that being Saturday at 8 o'clock and the 93 north or south only.
Mr. Chairman, if I could add one thing.
Please.
Going through the process with planning and conservation, we did have a couple revisions to the plan. I'd like to submit those drawings so the permit refers to the same drawings that the other permits are referring to, if I may.
I'd have no objection to that personally. How does that affect, I was just going to say, how does that affect
Through
what
the
we're
chair,
doing?
do those revisions need to go back to the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board and the,
They have been already.
oh, okay,
These are the plans that were approved by Don last week.
okay.
Mr. Chair, I would advise that the board consider, once you feel that it's appropriate to close the hearing this evening, to do so, and then take the actual vote at your next meeting, and then in the meantime, we'll be able to modify the terms and conditions of the permit.
All right, so so the recommendation then is, I think we've had the public hearing, I guess, based on a new set of drawings, and on the presentation made, we'll get another set of documents for the 25th and vote on this permit at that time.
We need to close that hearing.
Yes, I know. I just want to make sure
That
I'm
would be
following
my
the
recommendation,
procedure
yes,
correctly. Okay, so that being said, the public hearing is officially closed, and as a result of that, and based on the conversation we've just had, we'll take up a motion. Jeff has made some copious notes about what that motion will include. I think we will get a revised version of the recommendation from DPW in 2 weeks that would include those.
Yes.
Okay, and then we'll take the vote in 2 weeks. That's satisfactory?
I make a motion to approve the conditions with the understanding of the additional language that we put into the motion, specifically north and south.
Well, thank you, Mr. McCoy. Certainly, your motion can be recognized. I want to be real clear. We're not going to accept, the intent here is not to move to approve the request of the applicant this evening. We are reviewing the documents. We have new documents, so a revised submission will be placed before us in 2 weeks, and then we'll vote on the application at that time, which would include the recommendations, the one that you've requested, as well as the
I
hours.
thought you were talking about maybe make the motion subject to those conditions and it all fall into play, but.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's necessary. I think what we want to do is really just get a revised, complete application with all the documentation over the next couple weeks.
Sounds good.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. So, Mr. Boudry, we're going to do exactly that. The documents will come through us. I believe that in 2 weeks, if everything falls, fits the way we discussed it this evening, it should be a very quick discussion at that time.
Very good.
And so if you could just provide the cards to us
Absolutely.
tomorrow, that'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, sir.
Have a great night.
You as well. Thanks. That's a little hairy on that stuff, so I appreciate the guidance.
Yep.
So our 7:45 scheduled appointment at 8:15 is with Mr. Jim DiLorenzo from the United States Environmental Protection Agency with regards to just sort of a status update on Olin. And I'll say to Jim, thank you very much for your patience. I'm sorry we ran a little behind schedule. We probably could have anticipated that was going to run a little long, so probably should have given you a heads up. But nevertheless, thanks for hanging in there. I know you come with a barrage of experts and associates, so we look forward to having you reintroduce in some cases or introduce some of them to us. Thank you.
I'm all set, Jim.
So just by way of, I guess, a little bit of history, and I'll certainly defer to Jeff to expand on this a little bit if he sees appropriate. The intent for this evening was really, we just haven't seen Mr. DiLorenzo in a little while. And we, at the Board of Selectmen level and other departments around town, do get a fair amount, in fact, I would dare say copious amounts of communications from the EPA as well as GeoInsight and DEP and a number of agencies as it relates to the Olin Superfund site. But they're oftentimes technical and difficult to understand documents. And with regards to us being lay people regarding a lot of the subject matter there, I think it made sense, and it certainly we shouldn't go long periods of time without understanding what's happening during that time. The fact that we don't see Mr. DiLorenzo for a period of time does not mean that there isn't work going on over at Olin. In fact, much to the contrary is true. So it was my intent and I guess our hope that with just a sort of a brief overview from Mr. DiLorenzo, we could get an understanding, a little bit of the history of what's going on there, and really an update status of where we are in the mud today, as it were. I don't know if Jeff did that.
I think you pretty well captured it.
Very well. So, Mr. DiLorenzo, the floor is yours, and thank you again for being here.
All right, thank you, and I thank the rest of the board and Jeff for having EPA here this evening. I'm Jim DiLorenzo. I'm the Superfund project manager for the ongoing Olin investigation and eventual cleanup. With me this evening is Chris Smith. Please stand up, Chris. He's a new project manager at EPA who's been brought on to help with the Olin project moving forward. Gary Waldeck with Mass Department of Environmental Protection. We partner with Mass DEP on these projects, and Gary has taken over for Joe Coyne, who previously worked on the project. And then also Martha Stevenson, who represents the Wilmington Environmental Restoration Committee, and some of the other committee members are here this evening. They are the recipients of an EPA grant. They review the EPA documents and meet with EPA periodically to help convey community concerns and interests on this project. So that's who's here this evening. With that, I did hand the board a summary, one-page summary, which I'll follow along in providing an update. And then there's an associated figure, which I will reference as I go through the update. So there's a lot of history here. Again, I'm going to go through this in about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'd be happy to answer questions if you allow me to proceed through this first.
Thank you.
I would appreciate it. So just very briefly, the Olin chemical site was added to the Superfund list in 2006. The first item at that point was to negotiate an agreement with responsible parties to conduct an investigation under the Superfund law. That agreement took about a year to reach and was signed in July of 2007. EPA approved a work plan for the site investigation in 2009, and basically since that time, there's been field work going on at the site and around town. The objective of the EPA investigation under Superfund is to delineate the full nature and extent of all identified chemicals associated with the site. So it's not limited to just some predetermined list of chemicals. We look at the history of the site, what was done during the operation of the site, and we developed a very comprehensive list of about 208 chemicals, which were sampled for in all media across the site: soil, sediment, surface water, and of course the most egregious and most difficult being groundwater. Groundwater not only in the shallow above rock aquifer, but also into the rock aquifer itself. And so those studies were conducted in earnest from 2010 to 2013, and that culminated in what we call a remedial investigation report that was issued in 2015 for part of the study. The part of the study that dealt with was what we called Operable Unit 1, which was the former 30-acre Olin property itself, including soil, sediment, and some surface water tributaries that run across that property. OU2, or Operable Unit 2, which includes all the areas of surface water and sediment, not only that exist on Olin's property, but to the east of Olin's property, there's what we call the East Ditch, which is the drainage ditch that runs along the MBTA corridor. And then to the west, you have Maple Meadow Brook and Sawmill Brook and the associated wetland areas in that part of the study area. And so all that data was collected. It was fed into a risk assessment. We looked at both the human health risks and the ecological risks in surface water and sediment, and that's all published in that remedial investigation report, again in mid-2015. Where the study has lagged is for groundwater, what we call Operable Unit 3. Operable Unit 3 is basically all the groundwater across the study area, and there's a figure I attached for the board, and this figure just shows the extent of contamination in overburdened groundwater. But if you look at the figure, and my apologies for the small scale, but the former Olin property is right in this part of the figure, and this largest dashed line indicates the extent of groundwater contamination in the above rock aquifer. And the rock aquifer extends further to the west, but in the above rock aquifer, it extends about 3/4 of a mile into Maple Meadow Brook to the north and west, and then to the south and east, it dips down into Woburn a little bit. What's important to note is we didn't find it extending into other parts of Woburn. And so that study has progressed significantly. It's coming to an end now. The one area where we ran into surprise, and it's not even shown on this figure yet, but there's a well right here in the former cement manufacturer across Ames Street from the site. It's called groundwater well 413, and that was put there with the expectation that it would not have contamination in it, and it had significant contamination in it. So that caused Olin to have to step out with further wells, which they did, and that data is in the process of coming in now, but it looks like we've found a clean boundary now all around the site. So we know the full extent of contamination now, and that's what's been kind of delaying that part of the study. So, long story short is that several years of field work is wrapping up as we speak. The current status beyond that is that along with that field work, quarterly sampling of about 20 private wells is conducted there. Even though the town is served by a municipal water system, there are sporadic homes on private water, most notably the neighborhood of Cook Avenue, where there is not a public water line, but also in areas to the north and west of Maple Meadow Brook, there are sporadic wells that for various reasons, there are sporadic homes that for various reasons are not tied into the municipal system. And so those wells were all identified with the help of your health department, Shelley Newhouse. Her and I identified those wells back in 2009, and they've been sampled quarterly ever since. And generally what we see are very low concentrations of one of the chemicals of concern, a chemical called N-nitrosyl dimethylamine, or NDMA, which, there are, and that's the most concerning chemical in groundwater. It's most concerning because it's the most toxic, but it's also the most mobile. It wants to travel the furthest. So the fact that we're seeing this in these private wells, looking at the universe of the 200+ chemicals, makes sense that this chemical would go further. So it fits with what we know conceptually about that chemical. The concentrations have been very low. There is no drinking water standard for NDMA, but we do risk-based calculations in cases like that. And we have tentatively identified a concentration of 42 nanograms per liter as being unacceptable from a long-term risk exposure. And these concentrations are generally around 10, give or take, in these private wells. So it's concerning for sure, but it doesn't rise to a level where EPA can trigger an action, if you will. There are 2 wells, however, on Cook Avenue that, after about the first year, showed a consistent pattern of detections, and we asked Olin to provide those folks with bottled water and a bubbler for cooking and et cetera, and they did that, and they continued to do that after a little squabbling over it. But they continue to provide water to those 2 homes. So that private water sampling continues on a quarterly basis. There's a material in groundwater that is most concerning. It's called dense aqueous phase liquid, and that's just a way of saying that it's an area where the chemicals are super concentrated, and it's pooled on top of bedrock, so it's really dense, more contaminated than the surrounding groundwater. On that figure, I know it doesn't show up very well on the photocopier we have, but there are basically 4 pools of it. One extends underneath the Olin site, under what's known as the containment area, a slurry wall that Olin built to try to contain it. And then an adjacent pool under Jewel Drive, under the former FedEx building. And then the largest pool is under what we call the Main Street DAPL pool. It extends along Jewel Drive up to and underneath homes under Main Street. And it shows up as green on my figure, as well as the one that I emailed Jeff on the photocopy. The color was washed out, my apologies. And then there's a little bit of it in Maple Meadow Brook itself. And this DAPL, there's an estimated 25 million gallons, is, again, the real egregious groundwater that has the highest concentrations not only of NDMA, but other site-related chemicals as well. Other work that continues out there, there is a pump and treat system called Plant B, which operates on the northeast corner of the Olin property, and that was put in place because contaminated oil-like substance was breaking out on the east ditch back in the 80s. So they put that system in place in 1989, and it continues to pump today. It pumps about 1 million gallons a year of groundwater. There's very little oil left in that area. They've removed most of it, but there's enough that if they shut it off, it would probably pinch out again into the surface water tributary. So we're requiring them to keep it operating. And so that continues to operate. And then there is this containment area I referred to, which on the Olin property itself is back just north of the south tributary on the southern portion of the former operations area. It's a 5-acre slurry wall, which is basically a 3-foot thick concrete type of wall that was installed from the ground surface down the bedrock in an attempt to contain what was remaining of this DAPL and contaminated groundwater on the property. And so that remains, and they have to monitor and maintain that and do certain evaluations to assess for leakage through that. So those activities are all ongoing while this overall study continues. The other thing, I forgot to put a bullet on here, but Olin in 2014 and 13 completed a study on removing dense aqueous phase liquid. They put a test well in the Jewel Drive pool on the old FedEx, I believe it was FedEx or UPS property on Jewel Drive. There's a test well, and they pumped that test well at different rates. DAPL, even though it's in groundwater, it has physical properties that are different than regular groundwater. You can't pump the heck out of it like you can regular groundwater. You have to pump it based on kind of the gravity drainage rate, as they call it. If you pump it too fast, it's going to break up and disperse and cause bigger problems. So they were looking for the optimal pumping rate, which seems to be around 1/2 gallon per minute. So that pilot test was successful. It shows that you can remove it, albeit slowly. And in fact, they continue to pump that well. They're currently pumping it at 1/4 gallon per minute, because they eventually ran into trouble just recently at 1/2 gallon per minute. They were starting to get some fouling happening. So they're continuing to pump it at about 1/4 gallon per minute. And they've removed about 900,000 gallons of DAPL and maybe some mixed groundwater in there. But about 900,000 gallons of mass have been removed from that one pool to date. It looks to be about 40% of the mass in that one pool. Next steps. So a lot of data collected, long story short, a lot of investigations. The next step is to have, now we had that remedial investigation report done for operable units 1 and 2. Now they need to do one for groundwater. So now that they've completed and we believe have identified the full extent of contamination, they'll prepare this very significant report that identifies the nature and extent of groundwater contamination, provides some significant evaluations on what's going on in the aquifer, not only above the rock, but in the rock itself, and conduct what we call a human health risk assessment, which would look at, is anyone exposed to groundwater today? We don't think so, other than the private wells where concentrations are very low and don't trigger an action. But they also need to look at, theoretically, what if someone were to drink the most contaminated part of the groundwater? What type of risk would someone encounter in that scenario? And that will become our trigger for action for groundwater moving forward. And so once that study is reviewed and approved, not only by EPA but by the town, your consultant, GeoInsight, work and their consultant, CDM Smith, once that's approved, they'll move to conducting a feasibility study. And a feasibility study looks at the remedial cleanup options. It looks at a range of options from not very aggressive to very aggressive. And that will be not only for groundwater, but soil, sediment, surface water. It'll be for all media. Once that's done, out of that will EPA then will prepare what we call a proposed plan for cleanup. And that's where EPA will come to you folks, to the community, and say, this is EPA's recommendation on how to clean the site up. And that goes out for a formal public comment and hearing process. That's the only part of this long process that's formal. And we'll have a formal hearing, it'll be transcribed. We'll take oral and written comments. And once all those comments are considered, then EPA will issue a final cleanup decision. As you can see on this schedule I've outlined, right now that record of decision is slated for 2019. We've been working to try to push where we can to get that done next year. It's been a long time coming. Last time I came out to the community and had a large public meeting was in 2015. I said I'd be back when we had a cleanup plan for you, which I thought would be by 17, and here we are. We're still not there, but we are moving in that direction. Because we are pushing Olin, we are in a administrative dispute with them right now. I don't need to go into the details of that, but it kind of foreshadows some differences of opinion we may have with regard to groundwater cleanup that are starting to come out of this dispute process. And we'll get into more of those details moving forward, but clearly they have a different idea than EPA does based on the data that we've seen as to how the site will ultimately be cleaned up. And that's not unusual in these sites, but it's good to see them finally lay some cards down on the table. And so part of that is them signaling that they're going to looking at the technical and practicability of cleaning up the site. And again, we could spend hours just talking about technical and practicability. All I'll say about it is that there are some sites where it's not possible to remediate the aquifer to drinking water standards again, or in part or in whole. I'm not saying that's the case here, but they think they may have an argument for that, and EPA does need to consider that. And that, again, will go out for review not only by us, but by, to you guys and to work as well.
Can you repeat that again?
Yeah.
About
Yeah.
drinking water, because I'm not hearing that you're advocating for the town here.
No,
That comment.
so there is a process by which both EPA or responsible parties, so it's not just responsible parties, but there are cases where it is determined that it's technically impracticable to restore groundwater. And that's been, a part of our policy for a long time.
That's a wrong policy. I want you to take this to your next meeting, go down to Olin and fill it up with water and serve it to them. See if it's okay to drink.
Yeah. So to be clear, I'm advocating that, and EPA will continue to advocate, that DAPL needs to be removed and that aquifer restoration is possible.
Okay,
But
that's not what I just heard from you.
no,
That's
but
good. Okay.
but what I'm saying is the PRPs appear to not agree with that, and that doesn't come as a surprise to me. And I'm letting you folks know because it's probably on our horizon at some point. And knowing that is important so we can prepare to start looking at that issue.
I mean, you have one pool out of 4 that you took 900,000 gallons that are removed out of 4.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to work on the others? And then it's so unacceptable about you saying that EPA cannot trigger action on NDMA. Well, what is that? I mean, that's not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that just...
So, with regard to NDMA, the concentrations that we see currently in the private wells, thankfully, are below a trigger action.
So you would drink them? You would drink that water because EPA says it's okay to drink?
I would.
You would, okay. All right, that's good.
I mean, nothing
Because
gets.
I wouldn't.
I understand that, and I'm not happy about it either. I mean, nothing gets cleaned up to zero, unfortunately. I mean, there's always a safety factor, and it's a very conservative one. At NDMA, we're talking parts per trillion. We're talking about, very low concentrations. The concentrations in groundwater are up to 25,000, which are clearly unacceptable and clearly will trigger action, and that's where we're headed. But we do have to deal with these responsible parties, and that,
Irresponsible parties.
what's that?
Olin being irresponsible
Well,
in what they've done, not responsible.
the legal definition. And so there's a lot of heavy lifting ahead of us. And, that's, so the next step is to get the remedial investigation report. And that's where we'll have the opportunity to really dive into these technical issues. I can see you're troubled by this. I don't know
Oh,
what
yeah.
else to.
There's nothing not to be troubled
Yeah, it's
by.
not good
I'm
news.
real
It's not good
troubled by
news. I know that. I
And I
understand that.
expect that the EPA and yourself would be an advocate for the residents of Wilmington, not compromising.
Yep.
There's no, just a little bit left over is good. That doesn't work. It has to be gone.
So that's where the process is at. And our goal is to get to a cleanup decision that is the best solution for the site. And I've been working on this for 10 years. I've been working with Martha and other great members of your community to try to get to the right solution. I remain personally advocating that solution. But I want to be open and transparent about what's going to transpire here. And, these decisions are going to have to be made. And I want to make them with your input. So the other issue that Jeff asked me to talk about was New England Transrail. If you will, I'll move onto that, and then I can circle back and take more questions if you'd like. But New England Transrail is a developer who signed a purchase and sales agreement with Olin to purchase their property back in 2003. They want to construct a transloading facility on the property. Now, they've called it other things over the years, but they're calling it a commodity transloading facility that would take material in by truck and then ship it off by rail. EPA doesn't get involved on the specific reuse of a property, but our concern, and where we do get involved, is to make sure that whoever uses that property in the future, it's safe for their workers or other people who visit that site to be doing whatever activity they're proposing. And we also get concerned with regard to what they do in terms of making sure that it doesn't inhibit our ability to clean up the site and do what we need to do. So we're looking at New England Transrail from a Superfund standpoint with those two issues in mind. But there are a lot of issues beyond that, and there are other parts of EPA that'll be looking at things like the noise, dust, and other issues that go outside the scope of Superfund. The Surface Transportation Board is the federal agency that has the ability to approve or disapprove of NET's proposal. And they've had a docket open on this for a long time. They have recently made a decision that an environmental impact statement needs to be performed to look at many issues that the town and that the community has raised. And the EIS is their most rigorous environmental review process, and that's just getting started now. And through that process, because it is on a Superfund site, EPA is able to grant the community with a technical assistance services grant, which is going to allow, one of your community members applied for that, and I was recently told that that'll be approved. It'll allow the community to have access to a technical consultant that'll be provided by EPA to review the EIS, to look at issues that aren't directly related to Superfund, because work can already do that through the technical assistance grant, but they can't look at these non-Superfund issues, so this will allow them to broaden their scope and depth of review of the EIS process. And so that,
On this particular issue, will they be seeking your information input as to whether it's feasible to have this NET there?
yes.
They will be. So I'm
Yes.
assuming that you'll be with the town to say no.
Again, we don't opine on a specific reuse, we can't.
Well, you just said that they're gonna ask for your opinion on
Right,
it.
and so what they're gonna ask is, they're gonna ask a couple things. They've already asked, is commercial reuse of the site acceptable? And commercial reuse does appear to be, acceptable based on what we know about the level of contamination that remains out there.
Acceptable with this type of use? With train
Any
train
type-
coming in and
any-
trucks coming in that can cause vibration and
Those
cause
issues,
issues of
that'll be
more
reviewed.
DAPL
Yeah,
and
that-
all this other stuff that's happening?
That'll be reviewed outside the scope of Superfund. I mean, Superfund, yeah, that will be reviewed, that has not been reviewed yet. I mean, what's been reviewed is commercial reuse in general acceptable?
So how can you say that it's okay to reuse it for commercial if you don't know what's gonna happen? When a
Well-
train comes through or 400 trucks ride up and down Eames Street to that location with all sorts of,
Well, and that's the purpose of so if the answer were no, then that would be no. If it were a residential property, it would be a residential property, but it's not. It's a commercial property, it's in a commercially zoned area of town, and so that, that allows a commercial use to go forward. This particular use needs to be reviewed through that EIS process in terms of where they're gonna put buildings, where they're gonna put tracks, and are those issues of concern based on what we know about the contamination and what we know about the cleanup, and that does need to be reviewed.
and the answer to that is what?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. I mean, 'cause I don't know any more details about their planned use than anyone else does at this point. But the EIS will,
But you've already given approval for it to be used for industrial purposes.
no, we've acknowledged that industrial use
And what
is-
type of industrial use do you think will go there? Who's been trying to buy it?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Okay, so you're in favor of that?
no. I mean, I have no opinion one way or another. I
But you
can-
said that they're going to be asking for your opinion.
And we will review it within our guidance and our,
But you've already given your opinion, that it's okay to be used for industrial purposes.
generally. But the specifics need to be reviewed. And the specifics will be reviewed. Not only by
And then
me,
you'll
but
give
by...
another input on that, once you find out that it's a real way company coming in and trucks of 400 coming in. Once you get that clear in your head that that's what's going to take place there, then EPA will then go ahead and issue another statement that they would be opposed to it?
I don't know.
Can I offer a hypothetical, if I may? The scenario that you've just identified or highlighted is that EPA has indicated that the site, as it stands now, could be used for some commercial purpose. But right now, we have New England Transrail that wants to use it for this transportation offloading, onloading facility, which I don't believe EPA has taken a specific position on that specific use of the site. If hypothetically, a storage warehousing company, not NET, but just a big box kind of building, said that they would like to potentially use that space. You still, EPA would need to look at that specific use and analyze whether or not that's a use that is sufficient, or I don't know what the right word, that's a use that could be provided or would not infringe on or get in the way of the ultimate cleanup of the site. So you would review that, correct? And you're
That's
going to
right.
review NET when that proposal is put before you as to whether or not it infringes upon or puts in jeopardy the cleanup of the site.
Correct.
Is that, am I
That's
right
fair.
about
That's
everything I
fair.
said?
Yeah.
So you just haven't gotten to the point where you have enough details or data or information on the NET proposal to be able to make a determination as to whether or not it will have a negative impact on the cleanup of the site? That was a long question. Want me to try it
Yeah,
again?
No, I think I got the gist of it.
Because we've seen a lot of stuff from NET, and we get the gist of what they want to do, and I guess it's surprising, and forgive me, Jim, I don't mean to be
Yeah.
confrontational here,
No,
but it surprises me that you haven't elevated or risen to the level of having an opinion, not you, but EPA hasn't risen to the level of having an opinion about the NET project.
Right. And so, under Superfund, when it comes to EPA typically would embrace reuse, typically, with regard to Superfund, because we don't want to spend all these resources cleaning up a site to have it sit dormant.
Sure.
And so conceptually, that's our starting point with these sites. When it comes to specific reuse, we try to remain neutral and look at it from a potential exposure standpoint. Are people going to be potentially exposed to any residual compounds on the site? And we have a lot of data that says no, a commercial user, whether it be NET or whether it be Walmart, a commercial user is generally okay, 8 hours of exposure, 5 days a week, and there's a lot of numbers that go into figuring that out. And that's why Superfund looks at it up front. Then the second question, and the harder one, is, okay, given the specifics of what they want to do now, and given where the cleanup is, and we're not at the cleanup yet, but do you envision a scenario where they could build something that would prevent EPA from completing its mission of cleaning up the site? Given that we don't have a final cleanup solution yet, given that we don't have final plans from NET, that's a hard question to give a definitive answer to at this point, in all honesty. There are also a bunch of other issues that go well beyond the scope of that are related to the environment. Truck traffic, noise, handling of materials, some of which may contain hazardous materials moving forward, that go beyond the scope of what I can opine on under Superfund. But there is a NEPA, what we call a National Environmental Pollution Act program at EPA, and they specifically look at those things through an EIS. And so EPA will have a loud voice on those issues as the EIS is developed. It won't necessarily be a Superfund voice, but there will be an EPA voice on that.
Regarding the Superfund portion, I know that's your sort of
Yeah.
bailiwick. You talked about safety, but what about, and whatever it is, not being in the way of the ultimate cleanup, but is there an operation that you can imagine, just pretend it's not NET, but is there an operation that you can imagine that could actually exacerbate and make worse the flow of DAPL and NDMA into the water aquifer? A commercial application that while you're trying to do the cleanup, its operation over in the corner of the site is shaking the earth such that your cleanup is not able to be done?
That's a fair question. I don't know. I mean, the fact of the matter is most of the DAPL, the 25 million gallons, most of that mass, the horses left the barn. Most of that mass is sitting under the center of what is between Jewel Drive and Main Street, which is subject already to significant truck traffic and other industrial uses and probably similar. You have to look at the whole pie. What's on the Olin site remaining is a small part of DAPL within the containment area that we're pushing for Olin to remove, and hopefully they will. If that remains, then I do have a heightened concern about vibration and how it may impact that slurry wall, and we'll look for the EIS to answer, to provide input to that question, because I don't know the answer to that right now. But we also have to look at it with regard to what's off-site already and what impacts are we seeing, already to the larger DAPL pool. So they go hand in hand.
I appreciate the answer you've given a couple of times, is I don't know, because truthfully, the science is being determined, the studies are being done, and I recognize that there's still an ample amount of data that needs to be seen. But at some point, even with all of that data, I get the sense that no one's ever going to be able to know whether or not rail cars and heavy trucks are going to shake the earth such that the DAPL's going to move. I think the answer is potentially, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think you're going to come to a conclusion at some point where you just don't know. And it's my prayer that when you say, I don't know if this is going to move or not, that you're going to say, we can't have this kind of an operation there until this earth is cleaned. And that's going to take a while. So I'm hoping that that's the conclusion of this, some of this. I want to make sure I go to my colleagues here. Jeff, you said you look like you wanted to chime in here.
I just, certainly one of the things that's been very troubling for the town is that EPA, at least to this point, has, I don't want to say endorsed, I guess, but it's certainly given the green light to NET to proceed. A couple of the concerns that we have, and we've noted this in comments that have been made, one is, quite frankly, given the approach that NET has taken over the last 10 or so years, where they've been, not forthcoming, kind of playing a game of shuffle in terms of what their true intentions are. One of the other concerns is just the nature of that type of operation. Just as the oil companies say, we don't ever anticipate having oil spills. We've seen Exxon Valdez and all these other major oil spills. I certainly would imagine that NET would not design their facilities to have spills, but given the level of activity that's going to go on there over the course of time, it doesn't seem inconceivable that there could be some kind of contaminations coming from their operation that, from my perspective, could just muddy the waters, so to speak, in terms of then trying to figure out who's responsible for what. So clearly our preference would have been that, given the fact that we have not completed the data collection or let alone identified the options, that EPA would have withheld its green light, if you will.
Can I just comment on that,
Please.
Jeff? Yeah, and I understand that, and I certainly understand the view. I do want to say it's not a green light that EPA gave NET or the STB. What we told the STB for a long time is that we don't know if the site is safe for commercial reuse. We won't know until we reach a certain point in the study. And that point in the study was issuing that risk assessment in 2015. And at that point, I could, no longer say that the site's not safe for commercial reuse. So that was kind of what you interpret as a green light, is us kind of removing the red light, I guess. That was what, that's what led to the letter EPA issued in 2015 that said we can no longer, all the previous letters had said we recommend that the STB abate, your process until EPA, reaches a point where we can answer whether commercial reuse is safe. And we reached that point. It took, a long time, but we reached it. So now we need to look at the issues with regard to cleanup moving forward.
I want to make sure everyone has a chance to chime in. Please, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the role of the EPA, and I've been on the board a long time. Back in 2003, I met you, the gentleman, not here, but the other gentleman, DEP, basically handed the ball to the federal government, the EPA, because of the Superfund site, and they had the funding to do it. And I don't proclaim to be an engineer, but I come from the school of common sense. We want less contamination on that site, not more. And we talked about the blast radius. We talked about the weight. We talked about the truckloads on October 25th, 2016 at the middle school. That was the public hearing from the Surface Transportation Board, and many people testified. I testified, and this thing's been close to my heart for a long time, and we talked about, for example, LNG. I remember Ms. Sullivan talking about the blast radius, and we talking about LNG. You're talking about all these contaminations going on that site. We want less, not that, and I'll talk about the EPA in a second. It's an issue that's been going on for a long, long time, and what's really sad is those folks that live in the area, people off Cook Ave, Ames Street, right off of Woburn Street, all the side streets in that area. Some people want to, eventually someday going to sell their house. They're not going to get the full market value for those homes. Those are the people who are being really, really affected by this, the town as a whole. And I can talk about agreements that were signed in back 2003 and 4, and I'll touch upon that in a moment. So there's a couple arguments here. We had to demonstrate to the Surface Transportation Board why it should not go there. And I thought the town did a decent job, but we had activists in the town. I myself, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, spoke opposed to it. We talked about shutting down wells, and now I'm going to just ask you a question, but I'd like to touch upon a little bit, Mr. DeLorenzo. I appreciate you being here, but I just want to ask you a question. Do you know if any monies have been paid to Olin from the previous land and building owners that occupy the Olin site on Ames Street that may have contributed to the site evaluation and the cleanup? From what I understand, Olin went after the folks that were on that site prior to them and recouped a lot of money. Do you have any idea if that has happened? Any idea on a dollar amount that Olin was compensated through the other
I'm not aware of any of those amounts, but I do know that in addition to, so when we came on board and the site was listed, we not only went after Olin, we went after the preceding owners and operators who also had liability. And so Olin's not the only responsible party that's performing this. They're the out front, but there are other parties contributing. I don't know how they divvy it up among the three of them, but there's American Built Right, which was a former owner-operator, and I'm drawing a blank on the other Steppen, thank you. And so they're also contributing parties, and they share on the financial responsibilities moving forward from that point. Going back, I have no idea.
Now, I don't know the dollar amount. I've heard in excess of $20 million.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that. I'm not saying that's a rumor, but I've heard that. And to be totally honest, back then in 2003, the town, we only got $3 million from Olin to tap into the MWRA. And we can talk about that down the road.
Right.
But the bottom line is there's two different issues. Relative to EPA, and I've said it before, and I like to say it again, that we're counting on you, big brother, the federal government, to help us folks here, because this is something that's important to us, and I can understand my colleagues and how they feel about it. But, it's two separate things, and I would hope to think, we did pay a price. We had to shut down 5 of those 9 wells that we at one time sold to another community. That's long gone, and we just got $3 million from Olin, and that was it. I just asked the town manager, and I had an idea, I want to make sure. Geo Insight, we're paying, I don't know how much money we spent for tax dollars because of Olin. We can point fingers to this agreement and that agreement. I know we need to move on, and I said it, back in 2003, we had a tolling agreement. I voted against that. It was a horrible agreement. All we got was $3 million, and we had a former town council back then. And then we had another former town council in 2004 that kind of preserved some of our rights as best as he could. That was another former town council. I don't mind saying. The first one in 2003 was Mike Newhouse. That was a horrible deal. And I served on this board. And what we should have did, and I was not part of the Kane regime, I was not part of that majority. Mr. Kane voted for it, Mr. Forrest was appointed, and Mr. Palmer. Horrible deal. And I was not part of that majority. What we should have done was spend our own $3 million, put our own water to tap into MWRA, and we should have went after them on everything. That way they could never develop that site. Now, the other town council was Paul Dorenzis, who I never even voted for. And there was a little bit of a revolution back then about members getting appointed on the Board of Selectmen. We can talk about that another time. But we did reserve some rights from Paul Dorenzis, and I never voted for the guy, but he did an outstanding job. He did really good, helped preserve some of these rights. But the bottom line is, it all comes down to dollars and cents. It just makes no sense, no logic at all, that we're paying. We have, I don't know how much money we've spent on Geo Insight. It would have been nice if we had a strong agreement, keeping them more accountable, paying for Geo Insight, paying for additional costs. Jeff, I want to carry on, but any idea how much money we as taxpayers spent because of this Olin on Geo Insight? Any idea?
Not offhand. I mean,
It's a lot of money.
certainly, we pay a monthly fee to Geo Insight for their services.
Yeah, I'm not pointing fingers here, but we're really counting, I understand the failing of this board, but we're really counting on you, Jim. And I know you've always been a gentleman coming in here, and we need to reach out to you. And obviously, New England Transworld is not what we want out there. And if we had a gun to our head talking about a warehouse, maybe we could work out with something with Amazon, because they're looking to come to this area. I'm not saying that's what we want to do, but, but it's just sad to think that property, that thing should have never been developed. We should have just, at that back then in 2003, that's it, we're done. Shut them down. That's at least what they could do. And they, big top, Fortune 500 company. And let's face it, New England Transworld. I mean, Transworld, I'm not a computer whiz, but I know you go online and you can see within the country, there's a derailment of toxic waste sometimes going out into the residents and going out into these roadways, and it's happening all the time. We don't want it. And once again, we're looking for less contamination, not more. And I'd really hope, Jim, and that you really can step up to the plate to really help us. And we're counting on the federal government, Big Brother, to help this little small town, because there's so many little small towns in this whole country, and we have 351 cities and towns. And I did support a lot of things as the gentleman from DEP handing it off, and I did vote for that. Thought that was the right thing to do, and I knew it was the right thing. And I know I spoke a little bit, but should have a strong agreement. And I think we've been in different situations today in 2003, but we're not. But now we need to move forward. Sad, totally sad. Thank you.
Mr. DiLorenzo, thank you for being here tonight. Being the rookie on the board here, I'm certainly glad that you're here and giving us an update, and I appreciate it. And I also appreciate Martha and her group for keeping us abreast of what's going on. I think they're excellent at what they do. And Mr. McCoy just mentioned Geo Insight has been a great addition to the town. I just want to go on some of the things you brought in earlier. You said that they removed 900,000 gallons of DAPL.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say there was 25 million gallons of DAPL?
The most recent estimate I've seen.
At a quarter of a gallon per hour, we're looking at a lot of years.
Yeah, and so part of what we're trying to push Olin to develop is to look at alternatives that look at multiple wells, or what we call horizontal wells, or other options to try to, speed that up. And that's what will come out of this feasibility study. And so you can't just do the quarter for one well, but that, it's going to be a long time, even under the best scenario.
So that being said, any of these dates that you gave us for the next steps, do you see any of these moving up at all? I mean, you make early 2018, late 2018, mid 2019, late 2019, and then you negotiate responsible parties for employment cleaning late 2020 and beyond.
Yeah.
Do you see any of those dates moving up? I mean, I know you had mentioned earlier you were hoping to have a cleanup by 2017.
Right.
Do you
So we are, again, in dispute with Olin because we are trying to push them towards having a cleanup decision, at least proposed out to the public next year, and that's what we're trying to push for now. It's going to be very critical because of these other issues that I raised, not that I raised, but that I'm sharing with you, that I know the PRPs, and Olin and others are going to raise, that we don't just gloss over this remedial investigation. I mean, we're really going to have to dig into it and make sure we know our stuff so that we can continue to, push in the direction that it should go in. So I don't see a lot of wiggle room, long story short, in moving that up. But I do think it's attainable to at least get it within that schedule. Any cleanup itself, I mean, there's a lot of contamination in the groundwater and in the DAPL, and it's going to be a lengthy cleanup for sure, regardless of what the final solution winds up being. But but we're moving in that direction finally.
So, one of my last questions, so I grew up in Woburn, and as a youth, I went through what they had a Superfund site, and I just recently read that the mayor is putting together some kind of task force to finally, that's gonna be available to develop soon. Do you see this site being developed or in use prior to a cleanup or a complete cleanup?
There are cases where that has happened, and that could happen here. It's not out of the question.
Because I want to go on the record that I'm certainly against New England Transrail, 100%.
I understand that.
And not only, I hope the federal government and yourself, but the Mass DEP, I hope they have an opinion on New England Transrail also. So,
Right.
thank you for your time. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Ed. Greg, and certainly Kevin will give you another chance. Do you have
Okay.
some-
No, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lorenzo. I appreciate your presentation. I also want to thank the residents, Ms. Sullivan, and others who are working really hard and have been working on this for a lot longer than certainly I've been here and for years now. So appreciate that. I think that it goes without saying that this board is united on this issue with the community. I think we've yet to come across somebody who's in favor of having New England Transrail come here, and I think we voiced that with the letters that we've sent to our delegations at the state and federal level. It was, I think, this past spring that I met with Representative Seth Moulton's office to voice our opposition to this and to try to get their help. I mean, at the federal level, I mean, there's only so much we can do as volunteers here and on the Board of Selectmen, but we really need that help from the state and federal delegation, and I would continue to maybe suggest that we continue to stay on them in the form of a letter, phone calls, whatever it may be, to make sure that we have their support. Because obviously, I agree with my colleagues that, for residents, whether it's one family, two families, that's just one too many to be drinking bottled water. I think if you pay taxes in Wilmington, that you should have the right to clean drinking water. I just think that's totally unacceptable to have somebody drinking bottled water. And so with that, we really need EPA's help on this, and I appreciate you staying on it. I would urge residents who are more informed on this than I am to reach out to us. We need ways that we can continue to support this effort and make sure that this site is cleaned up for the community, and find ways to make sure that New England Trail doesn't get off track. I don't want to say. I don't mean to be funny, because it's very serious. But as a board, we want to make sure that we continue to do everything we can to make sure that this site gets cleaned up. So I appreciate the residents who have spent an awful lot of time on this. And Mr. Loud stole my question here, but I just want to be clear on the issue of the final cleanup decision. You did mention, late 2019, but possibly sooner. That was the one you were specifically talking about, could be sooner?
Trying to get done in 18.
Okay, which is good, because as was mentioned prior, we are spending tax dollars. This is costing us money all the while. So I'm specifically sensitive, I know my colleagues are probably too, but are sensitive to the fact that this is costing us money to make sure that residents can have clean drinking water. So I look forward to the day they don't have to drink out of a bottled water. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Mr. Kyrie?
Yeah, Mr. DiLorenzo, the letter dated August 16th, 2017 to Geo Insight, or from Geo Insight to you. Maybe you can explain a little bit about it. I know it says here that on August 8th, 2017, the town of Wilmington forwarded to Geo Insight the following two documents. One on the focused human health risk assessment, and then on the OU3, which is the drinking water or groundwater. And it says that they did not receive the significant documents, data evaluation to make any types of decisions. And it also says that the town was to be allowed to make its comments by 2018. I mean, why wasn't Geo Insight given the documents that they needed to address these issues?
Yeah, those documents that are referred to came out of the dispute process EPA is having. We We asked Olin to prepare those documents to get a snapshot look at the direction they were heading in, essentially. The full risk assessment will be fully, the town and Geo Insight will have an opportunity to fully vet the full risk assessment. There's like a little piece of it that we just asked Olin to give us to get a better sense of what direction they were heading in, and now we know. So we didn't take a long time to review them either, knowing that we're going to get the full risk assessment and have an opportunity to fully vet that through Geo Insight and through work. So they will have an opportunity.
That will all be forthcoming, and we'll be
Yes.
given the opportunity through 2018 in order to respond to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, I just, just to hear that there's DAPL of 25 million gallons still in that area, and to have NET bearing down on that facility, I hope EPA will step to the plate for Wilmington.
Go ahead, Greg.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, when's the next time we could expect an update from you?
I told Jeff anytime the board, right now, my next time I want to come out to the public, unless I'm asked to come in front of you folks, is when we're at a point where we have a final risk assessment for groundwater, and I can come out to the community and explain what that says and have more information on what the cleanup's starting to look like. And so I would envision that being sometime late next year, but I'm always happy to entertain coming in front of the board.
Well, you're more than welcome to come earlier than that. How's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
If I could, I'm just wondering, the role of the local Board of Health, and I know there's some folks here tonight. Now, I don't know how much jurisdiction or how much they say. They can enlighten me. I always thought that there was a lot of weight with the local Board of Health when it comes to clean potable water for the community. Now, here, it's just a local Board of Health. How much weight does that have if there are, there's an issue with drinking water? We shut down 5 of the 9 wells, and that perhaps at that time was one of our greatest natural resource,
Right.
I'm just wondering if, could you tell me, or somebody in the Board of Health that's here, tell me, how much weight does the local Board of Health have? I thought they had a lot of weight in something like this. I don't know. Am I not looking at it right, or?
Can you help me out a little bit? A lot of weight in terms
I don't know,
of-
I thought it was supposed to, I don't know, there was a lot, that you're supposed to provide clean potable water to the residents. And I
Right.
understand, we tapping into MWRA, and that's
Yeah.
solving it at the
So-
moment, but not those poor folks on Crooks Ave.
Yeah, I mean, your Board of Health have been really strong advocates for the community, and I've worked closely with Shelley Newhouse, the health director, canvassing the area, trying to find all the private wells and making sure that they're
And I
sampled.
agree, and I understand that, but I was just
Yeah.
wondering, I thought there might have been some law that Board of Health, there's nothing like that. I had to ask that anyway,
I mean,
even though it's,
We're in a bad situation because there is NDMA in some of these private wells, but it's very low, at a very low concentration, and by our guidelines, there's no drinking water standard for NDMA. We do conservative risk assessments, and if we could trigger an action, we would, but we can't. And so then the Board of Health certainly reviewed all of their regulatory background to see if they could compel action. They don't seem to have anything either, so the best we can do is monitor it, and the 2 homes that are on bottled water, strictly, they don't have to be, but out of abundance of caution, those are the 2 that should, because most of the detections we have are very sporadic. The wells are sampled quarterly. You'll have a low detection, then it'll be non-detect for 3, 4, then it'll be detect 1 or 2, but the 2 on Cook Ave are consistent. That's why we were a lot more able to be more cautious with
those
them.
2 folks, Olin's paying the tab relative to the bar.
They hold
That's
it,
mighty
yeah.
nice, Olin.
But it's not an ideal solution. But again, we're at this point where we can't trigger, we just can't. And we looked at it, and I worked with Shelley and the board, and they looked at it. And then there's nothing there that we can act on. When we get to a record of decision, that may change. and we may be able to compel action at that time.
Mr. Chairman, I only raise that because I heard, and I'm not, like I said, by far no engineer, but when you hear things that maybe the local Board of Health, and now you're saying if something changes, that maybe would be wonderful, obviously, with our local Board of Health here, obviously. I mean, I know they're all on the same page. They don't want to see them there anyway. I know that. But once again, in a nice way, Jim, whatever you can do for us, we're really hoping. I'm saying, I know you get a lot better with honey than you do with vinegar, but I'm just telling you, you're a big brother. We need you. Thank you.
Just one more question. What is the acceptable level to drink MDMA?
It appears to be 42 nanograms per liter.
That's really high? Yeah.
You wouldn't want to drink at 42,
State of
but
California, I think, is 10. They're actually one of the only states that have to stand it. It's 10.
And we don't, it's not a national, it's not a national standard. Okay, it's from state to state. In Massachusetts, standard is 42.
there is no written,
There is nothing. So who's going to write it, or who's going to put that up?
A lot.
So who's in charge of putting that out, to making it a standard?
well, under the Clean
Because I
Water
know you
Act.
said earlier you would drink it, but you
Yeah.
said now you would,
Well,
so,
no,
I mean, I
so-
know I wouldn't.
This
So-
board could probably petition the DEP and see what would come of that. You could petition the DEP and ask for at least standards that California has, which California has a lot of science. And you could request that. I mean, it would be unusual, but it would be a great thing for the board to do.
The EPA National Drinking Water Program has been looking at NDMA
Unusual, but
too.
you can do it. Got nothing to lose. It's a petition. They'd hold a hearing and then make a determination whether or not they would actually adopt the standard, and maybe suggest it's mirror the California standard.
It's not really easy. That's not, it would be a very long process, and the agency is not looking at adding new standards. So,
Yeah, so what? Yeah, I mean, so what's it gonna take?
there's an emergency, and we're working on all the emergency contaminants, this is a new contaminants. But there are no new standards in the works.
Why not?
Understaffed. If that doesn't matter, it doesn't mean you didn't want to do it. I mean, you could still
My
try.
comment was just, it's not as easy as.
Well, someone should do it. Someone has to do it. But why wouldn't you or someone pick the ball up and do it for us? Why wouldn't you protect the residents of the community, Massachusetts? Yeah,
EPA has done the exact same process we would go through in setting their 42 nanograms per.
yeah, it doesn't matter, right? Who cares? Yeah.
I say.
I know,
that's the
it is. I'm
EPA's
sorry.
risk assessment
I
model.
apologize. That's just the
Same-
feeling, that's just what it feels like.
Yeah, the reality, and this is an issue bigger than this site, the reality is the Clean Water Act manages a very finite number of chemicals. It's actually a very small number of chemicals that hasn't changed in decades. And the universe of chemicals that are out there are far broader than that, and this is one of them. This is a good example of one. It's just not managed in our public water supplies. And so then we're left to look at trying to develop cleanup standards on a site-by-site basis, not only with the NDMA, but there are other chemicals here as well that we have to develop cleanup standards for this site. And that's part of what this process will do. And but, the takeaway is our public water supplies, sample for this, the universe of chemicals is, stretches wider than this room. And that's the reality, is that the Clean Water Act isn't issuing new guidelines. And that's an issue that I can't, that's a Washington issue.
Just to be clear, that's federal. I mean, states can do what they want with federal clean water. In California, that's exactly what they did, because they had several sites with NDMA contamination, so they set standards at 10. And Martha, the wonderful world of iPhones, Martha just looked it up, and actually Massachusetts does have a guideline of 10. It's a guideline, it's not a standard, but it's a guideline of 10. Just looked it up. There is a guideline, it's just not a standard.
We put a punctuation on
Oh,
this.
you did it? Oh, okay. Our consultant did that, not us.
I think each of the selectmen have had an opportunity to have their questions offered and comments made. I'll simply punctuate it at this level. My personal feeling is it's bittersweet to have you here tonight. You know, I see dates that we're actually achieving some milestones and actually inching forward to a point where we're going to be able to talk convincingly about cleaning the damn place up. And for my almost 9 years sitting up here and 20 years in this town, it's really the first time we can start having those conversations, or it feels like we're approaching the first time to have those conversations. Because all those years prior, it was, Jesus, way the hell down the line. It was data, drill, pump. And now we're talking about maybe in 18, hopefully if you can push the envelope a little bit, is to have a cleanup plan. I know we're not cleaning it up, but we're putting a plan in place. That's the sweet part of this, if there's anything to be sweet about. The bitter part is, Jim, this New England Transrail thing, I just feel like EPA is not fulfilling, I don't want to say your end of the bargain, it's just not representing the interests of the small town folks, like my colleague said. And it's disappointing because I hold you guys and you in very high regard by and large, but that's a real source of frustration to me personally. I get the sense that's shared by my colleagues. And so, you know, you've heard the message. I wanted you to hear it from me too. It's a little unusual, but we do have our friends from work here. So Martha, I guess are you the chairperson currently? So I want to give you the opportunity, if you or one of your colleagues wanted to chime in on this subject. We appreciate you being here and the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those of you who don't know, WORK stands for Wilmington Environmental Restoration Committee. We got a grant initially from the EPA in 2008 and hired our consultants who have been working with us through the very long and frustrating process. And I'm cheered, I guess, that you're happy that we're getting to clean up, but we haven't even seen the remedial investigative report on groundwater. And the groundwater contamination is the reason Olin is a Superfund site to begin with. So all the time we've spent reviewing chromium deposits in the dirt on the property, et cetera, all well and good, but it hasn't really moved us forward to finally getting to the point where we can talk about remediating groundwater contamination, which is our issue. Now Jim is telling us that Olin basically doesn't want to clean up the groundwater, and he's sort of maybe glossing over the obvious with us all, but the dispute that they're having is that Olin is saying, well, since NDMA has migrated so far into the bedrock, it's impossible to clean up. So I think people need to realize Olin's setting up their case to tell the town, you're out of luck. There's nothing we can do, we're not willing to even try. As much as Transrail is a huge issue that we also have to fight, I think we need to be prepared to take Olin on front and center and continue the board's and Jeff's hard work, DO's insights work. You guys sent a really powerful letter to EPA earlier in the year, and we need to act as a community to continue to put pressure on and support EPA's efforts to force Olin into the cleanup process. Otherwise, they're a big corporation, they just want to roll over little towns and just leave us in the lurch. So I encourage the board to stay tuned in, to stay strong and support EPA, as frustrating as the Transrail piece of it is. Jim and his department don't really have jurisdiction to say yay or nay to Transrail. It's just not what Superfund is. EPA in other areas, as Jim described, might be able to help us on that. But we really have two huge battles. And EPA can't help us too much with the Transrail issue. That said, if people are interested, there hasn't been a lot going on, so we haven't been really good about reaching out to our email list in the past year because there's really nothing to report, and it's so frustrating. But if people are interested, they can contact either me or Suzanne Sullivan and let us know if you want to be added to an email list. It's our primary way of communicating. And we'll do our best to keep people posted on upcoming documents up for review and that type of thing.
Well, we thank you for staying close to this and other environmental issues in the town, you and your entire committee, so thank you for being here tonight as well. Anything else? Jim, thanks for being here. Keep in touch with us, please, and, try to be our advocate if you can.
All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll just let some of this settle down in a moment before we jump into our communications. Huh?
She's cold.
Yeah. Did you shut it down? Yeah, good. It was cold. Okay, thank you all for your patience. I'm going to continue on with the meeting if I could just ask folks to try to take conversations out into the hallway if possible. Thank you very much. So, thank you for your patience, everybody, here and at home. Certainly a lot of meat on that bone and worthy of ample conversation and more to be had. Jeff, if we could jump into our communications section, please.
Yes, the first item under communications is correspondence, as was previously noted, was dated August 16th. It was the input that Geo Insight, our consultant, provided with regard to this focused human health risk assessment. As was previously noted, it was a limited response because we didn't have as much data as we would have liked to have seen, but as Mr. DiLorenzo noted, the town will have an opportunity to have more fuller review at a later point in time. Next is correspondence. It's a memorandum to the board with regard to a request that had been made about the number of fire and police responses to the Edgewood apartment property in North Reading. This comes out of the Martin's Landing project that has been approved in North Reading. And as noted here in the memo, well, first of all, I would just note that the police department has indicated they really have very limited responses, only to the extent that they're involved in joint cases or regional NEMLIC type of incidents. So the cases predominantly relate to fire responses, and you'll note in 2013 calendar year, 1 medical response, 5 fire alarm calls, 2014, 0 medicals, 5 fire alarm, 2015, 3 and 11 respectively, 16 was 2 medicals and 7 fire alarm, in 17 through the end of August, 3 medicals and 13 fire alarm calls. So I know there was concern, and we expressed this concern as part of our comments in the lead up to the Martin's Landing project about the potential impact that another facility, in this case Martin's Landing, is a facility with 450 units slated. I just point out in the memo that we do also have to be mindful that North Reading does respond to the certain areas of Wilmington, Virginia Road, Bates Road, Larson Road, which are accessible through Reading off of Route 28.
Jeff, did you say Martin's Landing was approved?
It has gone through the approval process by both the state and the town's local boards. So that will be they're expecting to begin construction in 2018, it's my understanding. It'll be a phased project.
Is there any way we can get a copy of that approval? Because this dramatically affects the roads of Wilmington. Never mind the increase of fire alarms. We've already done 16 in this year. And over the 5-year span, it's been an average of 10. I don't believe on Virginia Road, Bates Road, or Larson Road, there's been a total of 10 over 5 years. And like we said when we were talking about this prior, we should have really, really expressed our concerns for the town of Wilmington. I mean, that area of town is already crazy traffic. I mean, with the Benavendetto and the Benavendetto site and the other people that they rent through, the trucks that go down that road, and the wear and tear that road takes already just from that, from the E.F. Shea and the Lynch. And now we're adding 450 more apartments over a period of time. That's a minimum of 9 cars if they do 2 cars per apartment, and it might be more than 2 cars per apartment. I'd like to see what the layout is, how many bedrooms we're talking about, how many vehicles we're talking about, because that's an insane amount of people coming on to the Wilmington roads. It's crazy.
I would just note that we did, as a group, several department heads met to review the various issues and potential impacts associated with this project. They included certainly the traffic, as you note, both at the intersection at Woburn Street and 62, and then the interchanges at 93, and even going as far down as High Street. All of those issues were prepared and presented in a letter to the state, but in spite of our comments, the state did authorize the project. So, but are you looking for a copy of the approval from the state?
No, I would like to see what the plans are. How many bedrooms and how many trips per day are they participating? They must be doing a traffic study. Let's say all the way, they must be doing a traffic study all the way down to 93, I'm hoping. I mean,
Yes.
if I was on a board approving that, I would ask for that as a minimal. They're also gonna ask it for Route 28 going the other way into North Reading. So that's a crazy amount of apartments. I mean, it's just like the Inwoods, and I was a part of that, in Woburn off of 129. It's just incredible amount of apartments.
Through the chair, I don't know if there's anything that can be done about that. To be quite honest, you know, they're gonna build their apartments.
Right.
It's gonna be what it's gonna be. But what mutual aid, is there a cost agreement on that, Jeff? I don't know. Mutual aid just is that you sign an agreement that we help them, they help us? Or do we bill them for the service and they bill us for the service?
No, there's no billing that I know of either case. Yeah.
You know, when I saw this, I'm sorry, Greg, I'll come right over. When I saw this as well, I had a similar question, Mr. Kara, just about, you know, if we start to see a spike in the amount of calls that we're responding to at Martin's Landing, I think it would be completely fair and altogether appropriate to get together with the North Reading administrators and just show the data and say, listen, this is not mutual aid. This is us aiding you. And there ought to be a mechanism, or at least a negotiation that takes place that says, you know, that we need, whether that's a financial remuneration or some other arrangement to make us good. It just doesn't seem fair that we should be responding at a what I perceive will be a fairly dramatic spike. That's 450 units.
Over 55.
And it's over 55, thank you. So, you know, there's not, I think, to Mr. Kyra's point, there's not an awful lot we can do about it, right? We've articulated our concerns to the state, they got their permits, and it's North Reading, and it's over the town line, and regrettably, we're on the 93 side of all of those residents, so we're gonna bear the brunt of that traffic. I don't think there's any way around it, unfortunately. I just hope that if we have an increase in any kind of costs associated with responses to that area, that we will keep available to us some type of negotiation to replenish those costs.
Yeah, I've certainly had the conversation with Chief McClellan that we would be looking to monitor the situation going forward. I've also spoken with the town administrator to try to get information from him as to what they are expecting in the way of traffic coming out of this facility, and he's indicated that they will be providing that, so we'll be taking a look at that as soon as it's made available.
And that's all we're really asking for, Jeff, is when it's available,
Yep.
because that's gonna be huge. It really is.
Yep. Greg, did you have something there?
Well, thank you. I just wondered how this might compare to other communities, so like, you know, say Tewksbury, you know, is it more or less, I don't know if it's really so much relevant anymore, but we don't have much control over private development in another community, has been stated, but, you know, I guess the same could be said, you know, in our neighbors in Tewksbury, you know, there's hundreds of units going up off of Route 38 there, and I guess I would share your same concerns. If we're gonna be stretched in different directions, we ought to be prepared for what might be coming down the line, so.
At least Tewksbury has a substation though, right? That's something that Reading doesn't have, at least to date. North Reading, I'm sorry, North Reading doesn't have. I know. But if, I'd rather see North Reading put a substation down on that side of Route 28 to respond to the increasing number of residences in that area. If we put a substation in North Wilmington, that's going to even exacerbate the amount of response that we have to that
We'll
area.
never do one.
Right. Food for thought.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is correspondence from Paul Brozo. You'll recall he was appointed to serve on the bylaw study committee, which is continuing its work. Unfortunately, due to work commitments, he is no longer able to serve on the committee, so he submitted his letter of resignation to Sharon George. You'll recall that the appointment to those posts is made by the town manager. The last time we went through this process, I requested input from each of the 5 board members, and that's how the slate was formed. I have some concern about the need for a timely replacement for this post because they are continuing their work. So I have contacted Harak Shah, who was actually an applicant, you may recall, for a position on the Finance Committee, and he has accepted the post. So he will be serving in that capacity for the balance of their work.
It's good news. I know Harak, and he's a good guy, and I'm glad that he's accepted that role.
Next is correspondence from the Mass DOT, and this deals with the Butters Row Bridge. He notes, responding to the Selectmen's 717 letter in support of replacing the bridge, Mass DOT will seek funding to replace the Butters Row Bridge at the same time as the bridge replacement that will be taking place at Route 38 over the tracks. The slated time target is 2021, so I think that's good news. Mike Woods and I had met with representatives from Mass DOT, and I think we're moving in the right direction, and it appears to us that we have their support, Mass DOT's support, to identify funding for the Butters Row Bridge replacement.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Does this mean that we will continue to see improvements previously scheduled to the bridge in the meantime? I mean, it's my understanding there was supposed to be some improvements done
Yes.
right around this time.
I will need to follow up on that. That's correct. They were supposed to do bridge improvements over the summer. It's my understanding some of them were done. I'm not sure that they were completed, so I will follow up on that.
Thank you.
On that, Greg, I did see on social media that the bridge was shut down, I don't know what for reason, a week or 2 ago, and people were asking, and someone said it was there they were inspecting it or something. I don't know if they were working on it, but if we can ask Jeff to follow up, that'd be great.
Well, we're touching upon that. Wasn't there a citation by the Wilmington Police Department? Didn't somebody with extra weight go over that bridge, get stopped? I mean, I didn't go to the last meeting, so maybe that was already discussed, obviously.
We didn't discuss it here, but I
No.
did see the same, it was news somewhere, but yeah,
I
there
read
had
that
been.
somewhere, yeah, all right.
I
Dangerous.
personally view this as good news. When we voted at the large open forum at the middle school, or actually when we took the informal vote there and the formal vote here, it was unknown whether, we conveyed to the DOT that we were in support of the idea of it. Who knew? This could be years away, and while 2021, it's amazing to even think about, but that's only just a few years away. So these things tend to move slowly, and I think that's actually not a terrible timeline, all things considered. So
Prior to that meeting, it wasn't on the Mass DOT's radar.
not
Now
even
it
on
is.
the radar. That's right.
Now
So
it is.
I view this as generally good news.
Yep.
Anybody else? Oh, very good.
We have correspondence from Governor Baker. This is providing the town with its apportionment for Chapter 90 funds, $761,621. Chapter 90, you'll recall, is the funding we get from the state for road improvements. There's a bond bill that this comes from and ultimately will need to be authorized, but this is our expected amount for fiscal 18.
Is that what you anticipated? Or Michael
Yes, it
anticipated?
was
Nothing less, nothing more.
right in the ballpark.
Great, thank you.
We have correspondence from the Mass Bay Transit Authority. This is just formally notifying us that their project for the monopoles that created such consternation amongst a lot of communities, including Wilmington, they've pulled the plug on that and are looking to, I guess, talk to the contractor about some kind of a lesser scaled project.
Pulled the plug on it, did they, Jeff?
They did.
They did. Sorry.
All right.
Anyone? Nothing? Thank you.
Next is correspondence also from the MBTA. They're talking here about a series of public meetings, one being on September 12th, 6:30, Reading Public Library. The other being September 13th, Lawrence Public Library. These public hearings are intended to provide information about the impact on the Saturday train schedule. So they are in the process of performing some upgrades, safety upgrades to their Haverhill line, which are mandated by federal law. So as a consequence, between September 23rd and December 2nd, train service during those Saturday periods will not be running. They will be transporting people via bus.
This is similar to what they're doing on the main line or on the 38 corridor.
Yes. We have correspondence from Jane Lyman, Comcast Cable, announcing a couple of changes with regard to program lineup beginning 9/15. WBIN TV will no longer be broadcasting Antenna TV or Grit TV. And then beginning October 31st, a weather scan will no longer be available. We'll be reporting that to their customers. And then the next item under correspondence is a petition from Bonnie Muncy, representing a group called Wilmington Families First, expressing their opinion about the global Montello project in opposition to it, and there's a number of signatures attached to the petition.
do have a number of board to consider requests. I guess the first, Jeff, is board to consider the request to install or confirm the installation of a stop sign at the intersection of Garden Ave, eastbound, and King Street. Jeff, I don't know if you want to summarize why we're looking at this again?
Yes, you'll recall that the request was made to install and authorize a stop sign on the opposite side of King Street. When we looked into the existing stop sign, it came to our attention that we do not have any record that indicates that the board officially authorized the prior sign. So this evening, at the board's request, the board will have an opportunity to formally vote to authorize the stop sign at Garden Ave on the eastbound side. Essentially, the effect of that is that technically, right now, if the police were to identify that as a citation item, it would not be enforceable because it hasn't been authorized by the board.
So really just a formalization of a sign that's already in place and give it some teeth. That said, unless there's questions, or frankly, there can be questions, but I would accept a motion to approve that sign.
I'll move to grant this request.
I'll second it. That's for discussion. Is there any discussion on it at all? I see none. All in favor? 4? Unanimous. Thank you.
Next is the board to consider signing the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission LLA review form. This is for 99 restaurants. There are 63 restaurants, 99 franchises across the Commonwealth, all of which are going through this process. It's really an administrative process in terms of the change in the management. And so in this particular case, as was done recently with Chili's, the Commonwealth, the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission actually reviews the application, signs off on it, and then leaves it to the individual municipalities that host, in this case, the 99, to actually approve it. So the ABCC, it has passed their test, if you will. It is now up to the board to authorize the change in management personnel.
Thank you, Jeff. That said, I would accept a motion to approve the all alcoholic beverages license for 99 restaurants of Boston.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion made and seconded. Any discussion or questions? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Signatures coming around.
Next, we have a request from Gigi Shanlujan to use the to authorize that the Wilmington Town Common be illuminated in pink during the month of October in observance of breast cancer awareness. You may recall that a similar request was made by Ms. Shanlujan last year, and as is the practice when these kind of requests are made, the amount of the cost for the lenses is paid for by the requester, and Public Works accommodates.
Wonderful. Yeah, Ms. Shanlujan is actually a neighbor of mine, and I know this is an area of great passion for her. I'll be hopeful that my colleagues will support it. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'll take a motion and a second. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi.
Next is a request from Health Director Shelley Newhouse on behalf of the Substance Abuse Coalition to use the town common and gazebo for a candlelight vigil on Thursday, October 5th. You'll recall. Okay.
Second.
We're jumping in. Did you have a
No, that's good.
Okay, good. So we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on that? No discussion. All in favor? Unanimous and appropriate given the subject of the evening. Thank you, Shelley.
Also, we have a request from Karen Campbell, the Recreation Director, on behalf of the Commission to conduct the 50th Annual Horribles Parade on Sunday, October 29th.
I'll make a motion. So moved.
Second.
Made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Looking forward to that.
And then finally, under board to consider approval of the license to sell Christmas trees for the Wilmington Methodist Church, care of John Avernitis, and the Boy Scouts of America Troop 56, care of John.
Motion to approve my old Boy Scout Troop 56.
Second.
I have a motion. I'm sorry?
Mr. Avanitis,
Very nice. I have a motion and a second at the end of the hall, the room here. All in favor? Unanimous? I can't believe we just approved Christmas tree sales. It just hurts me. We are at public comments, so I'll go to the audience. Is there anyone here that would like to ask a question? Yes, sir, please, if you don't mind, identify yourself and your address, please.
My name's Dave Norton. My family has been in this town for 7 generations. My wife wanted me to show you this, and she said for me not to get angry. But in the Lowell Sun, on our street, 2 Laurel Ave, that's where I live, which is the next road over from Muse Ave, we made the front page. We had 5 generations living on the street. This is our town. I hear you guys talking about how much you love the town, and it's really great. And I'm extremely frustrated. Look at my neighbors around me with what happened on Muse Ave, 13 Muse Ave. 100-year-old home. We don't need the PR, but on the front page, you've probably seen the town crier, right? We've all seen this. And you guys, I feel like we're turning the tables here now, not EPA. EPA is with regard to asbestos, and then as an agent for EPA, U.S. government, you have the DEP, acts as the agent, making sure in Massachusetts those laws are enforced. And in fact, if you go into your own health department regulations, and I could name them, in the environmental section 11.1 and in the administrative section 1.3, you say you're going to enforce these laws. Right now, and I feel like Mr. Cairo over here when he expresses frustration with Olin Chemical, right now in my backyard, I have a building ripped down halfway. I have pictures here, that if you guys want to see it, of a dust plume, and if you read anything about asbestos, which is a very serious thing. This is very serious. It's cumulative attack. If your wife, for instance, her father was killed as a result of asbestos. This is something you don't take lightly. And I'm looking at you guys because you can bring about the change. We've had Mr. Godzak came down 2 times the week before, spoke with representatives of this town that says we've got heavy equipment there, we've got asbestos siding. If you just did a little query on any one of your phones, or you own 10 records, it's asbestos siding identified in the town on your records. And if you just did 13 Muse Ave and scroll down, you'll see asbestos siding. We signed the building permit that enabled the contractor to go out and start tearing down this building. My grandkids, myself, my neighbors, and I could go up and down the rows here, ingested this stuff, and we're still ingesting it today. When the wind blows, they didn't put a tent over the house. They went down and had a $50 tarp and kind of bolted it on the side. And when the wind blows, I see the dust coming off the top of that house. It's blowing over in my yard. As I watch the kid, when this was going on, I'm watching the kids ride their bikes up and down Muse Ave, right through this. And we, as a community, allowed this to happen. Especially when one of the residents, I've got some great folks in the neighborhood that are passionate about Wilmington. We love Wilmington. I'm going to probably end up being buried in my backyard. It's a great place. And I want to keep it a great place. And I need your help in doing it because various departments, you had the ability to stop this several times and we did nothing. We did nothing. So I would ask, and I'm not I'm not gonna name any names, but I would ask this board to go through the town manager and say, hey, what is our plan to prevent this from happening in another place in Wilmington? Because it's not complicated. This is not this can be solved. Other communities have done it. You don't need to change any regulations. You just read your regulations. It's in there. We're supposed to be enforcing the EPA standards, the agency, the DEP, and there's another agency, and it's called the Division of Occupational Safety. There was 2 agencies created that are going to support the EPA mandate on asbestos. And what that agency does is it says, I watched this poor fella in this guy that's actually breaking down this building. He has no protective gear on at all. And if you do any kind of investigative work, and it sounds like Mr. Hull knows the laws in this area, there should have been a sticker posted on the building, said that they've gone to the DEP, they filled out the forms, you need to have a certified contractor, you need to have a standardized, before you do any demolition at all, you have to remove the asbestos. And you have to get a certified guy. The state DLS actually certifies different organizations, and they're out there. You get a consultant to come in, which the builder has done, because I met the consultant, Pat Riley.
After the fact.
After the fact. But now she has to generate what they call a non-standard plan that says, hey, you didn't do what you're supposed to do, and now we have to figure out where we go from here. Why we signed this building permit or demolition permit is beyond my imagination. We know the law in this town. We know that we should have got, you know, with the EPA frustration you're expressing. I'm doing the same thing. Why did we sign this? We know we're supposed to be protecting. I have a right to clean air. And the last thing, I mean, I could go on and on, but I'm not gonna. But the last thing, guys, is it happened, right? I happen to just ride around the block in my car, and I see all these big stickers all over the place. Asbestos, asbestos, stay off. They put a little plastic thing on, and I think Shelley went ahead and talked to the contractor, and they put a wire fence around there, which is better than that little piece of plastic tape. But no one was notified that this has happened. No one is notified, and no one took the time in this town. I only wish we had Governor Scott here from Florida. You do what's right. My dad always said you do what's right, and we as town people, we're family here. We got to talk to one another. When things like this happen, I don't know if you guys been over to Muse Ave. I don't know if you know where Muse Ave is. But if you go over there right now, you will see a house halfway torn down with asbestos siding, and when you break that asbestos, it turns into dust. And it just goes up in a plume, it comes over, and it gets in your lungs, and it doesn't leave. That's why cumulative exposure, and if you can imagine, and I know I'm getting kind of carried away, my 2-year-old granddaughter's out there on my porch taking this all in. And I beg you guys to take this serious. You can bring about the changes that are going to prevent this from happening in your backyard or someone else's backyard in this town.
Let me address this. I have spoken with you, Mr. Norton, and I fully understand, and quite frankly, I take responsibility for the problem. We didn't do what we should have done, and I'm not going to make excuses. I've had conversations with the department heads that were involved. The fact is that we directly do not have responsibility for regulation of asbestos. That said, what we should have done is when we became aware that the asbestos, that this gentleman was going rogue and demolishing this building, and we should have contacted DEP. If I was aware, if I had it to do over again, I would certainly expect that we would do that, and we will do that in the future. I've talked to the department heads about putting a process in place where we would expect that the prior to any sign-off on a demolition permit, that the Department of Environmental Protection provide evidence that they have, if the property has asbestos, that the company has filed, or the contractor has filed, the proper plan for remediation. We will also expect that rodent control will be in place, and dust control. Those are all things that other communities quite honestly do. I've checked with some of my colleagues, and the fact of the matter is, for whatever reason, it has not happened, and there has not been that practice in Wilmington. Like I say, I can't undo what happened, but I can tell you it will not happen again.
Right, because there are many more homes, and I could take you down the road, that are older homes. That 129 is just, it's got a lot of older homes. Asbestos in itself, those shingles, they're fantastic. They'll last forever. That's the problem with them. They'll last forever, and then as you tear down these things and you do a remodeling and stuff, you have to make sure in the state, a DEP, you've got to go to DEP, even if you're not dealing with asbestos, and you've got to submit forms, and then if you do have asbestos, like you're saying, you need to have a plan. It needs to be signed off, and that should have been provided to your health director that signs off on your demolition, and you got to wait till that happens. This honor system that we have around here, it's not working. And all I'm saying, and I appreciate everything you said, I appreciate what you're saying, and I'm hoping that it never happens to another family. Now that it's happened, Mr. Hall, what am I supposed to do? I know the contamination's there. What do I got a family. We talked about the wells, the people that can't drink out of the town water and all this kind of stuff, and they get bottled water. What do I do? What do we do with our? Do we have? How do you clean up stuff that's a fine powder that is getting, every time I take care of my grandkids 3 days a week, I know they're getting inside their bodies. What do I do? I'm looking for the experts that kind of, like you said with EPA, what do we do here? And that's the frustration. I don't know. I can't get my vacuum cleaner out, and every time I mow my lawn, am I stirring it up? Am I making it worse? I don't know.
I think and I can't answer that myself. I'm not an expert in air quality. It would seem to me what we need to do is get in touch with the DEP representative who is at this point has jurisdiction over this, and find out from them what kind of air quality testing will be done. We don't have that expertise. We don't have that authority.
I called her boss, McCauley. Everything's under investigation. We can't really disclose anything, and if you want to have it done, you're going to pick up the dime. I don't even know where to go with this. It's a logical. I used to operate a nuclear reactor. I know about regulations and stuff. You gotta, when something like this happens, you gotta notify the people around us so that we're aware of what happened. That's one of the big things in my mind. We got, you tell us if the school buses aren't coming, we got that little phone thing that, we get messages and stuff. We should have been alerted, especially abutters, the guys that are just, I walked to my fence and it's right there today. Tomorrow when the wind blows, it comes across, and I'm just saying, what do I do?
I'm gonna chime in. I don't want to speak for any of my colleagues. I'm going to speak for me. First of all, I see the hat that you're wearing, and I want to thank you for your service to our country, sir. So, second of all, I appreciate the passion, and I can see that you're very frustrated with what took place. And I can assure you that from where I sit, I don't live in your neighborhood, so it didn't happen to me directly, but I feel the same level of passion. And Mr. Hull will corroborate that when we had this conversation, I was incensed when I learned that we, as a government and as employees of the town, that this had happened. This sequence of mishandling occurred that allowed for a contractor to go and start knocking the stuff down. So I wish I could turn the clock back. I really do wish I could turn the clock back, but I can't do that. But what I'd like to do, Jeff, and I don't know how, again, I want to make sure that my colleagues have an opportunity to offer you their position on this, but, Mr. Norton has called DEP, and he's trying to get someone to take some action to, at worst, encapsulate the site until they can determine how to handle it going forward, so that no breezes will waft this stuff into the air. I don't think that's an unreasonable request at all. And I think as soon as tomorrow, I'd like to see a crew out there encapsulating this in a professional manner, not with blue tarps that are held down with rocks. So how we do that, I don't know. And I don't know if that's something the town can help us do, or if that's DEP where they can give us some advice, but we need to be able to take some action quickly. We've talked about how government has a tendency to move a little slowly. And it's state government moves a little less slowly than federal government, but it's still slow. So I don't anticipate that the DEP is going to, jump into action unless we rattle some sabers and get them to jump into action. I don't know how we do that. We make a few phone calls, we go up the channel, but that's how I would like to handle this. Get it covered until the plan for its removal in a formal, whatever the scientific, whatever the appropriate way to remove that material is, whether you encapsulate it. We've seen those stories, the guys in the big white suits come in and use the appropriate equipment. That's going to take a little while probably to get to that point, but until we get to that point, cover that site so it's safe. And I don't know how we get there either, but it seems like we ought to be making a phone call.
Can I add to that? Can we get contacted via email when that happens?
Yeah, yes, of course. Please keep us posted. Yeah, Greg.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very sorry that you're going through this, Mr. Norton. And I think that, it shouldn't be up to Mr. Norton and his neighbors to be contacting EPA, We should be the ones contacted
Absolutely.
on their behalf. The town.
That's what I was implying. I'm sorry.
Someone
if I
obviously
didn't.
made a mistake
Agreed.
here, and they shouldn't be troubled anymore. We should be advocating for them now that we're aware of this. I should point out that I became aware of this on Friday, and I'm a little disappointed that came in the form of this packet, and that's how when I opened up my packet to find about the meeting, this is the way I'm finding out about it. That's unfortunate from my standpoint. I can only speak for myself, but I'm very disappointed that we're just finding out about it that way. And that's not the residents. You folks have every right to reach out to us, but the town should be notified, and its elected officials, when something of this magnitude takes place. And again, I echo Mr. Shampoo's comments that I hope we can get somebody out there to rectify this as quickly as possible. I feel for you folks, and certainly if there's anything I can do personally, I offer my support. Can I yield my time to the young lady who has her hand up?
Kathleen Moore, 15 Muse Ave, right next to the big demolition. Based on what the contractor spoke to me and my husband about, which I take everything he says with a grain of salt, I reached out to the DEP myself, never heard anything back. His version, Langone's version, is that what he did do is what the DEP has approved. They're aware of it. I don't agree with it because it's not covered. Supposedly, he's got this plan in place. Nothing's going to happen without notification. There's going to be air quality monitoring and, blah, blah, blah. Not to beat a dead horse, we tried to reach out to the town. We, the residents, were the ones who got the DEP there, because I'm sorry, the town was no help to us. I have a question. You said in your email, which I got very late, that your permitting process is going to change, because that is where the fault lies. Your own town website clearly states it's asbestos siding. The contractor is like, I didn't know, I used a different website. I was like, okay, sure, whatever. Everybody in that neighborhood who could see that house knew it was asbestos siding. He took the shortcut. If we hadn't been here that particular day, that house would have been down and in a landfill. Nobody would have known there was a house there. Asbestos isn't only in siding, it's around your piping, and it's in your flooring. The demo permit process has to change because the DEP can't monitor what they don't know about. So I guess my question as before you, are you still issuing demo permits today? Is that frozen? What are you doing?
We've established, and Shelley, I'm going to defer to you on that.
Please.
I'm Shelley Newhouse, the Director of Public Health. I just wanted to let everyone know what's going on from here forward in regards to the site. So DEP has issued their permit with conditions on what the contractor is now going to do. Now, DEP does not have to tell us, me, the town, what that permit entails because the site is under an active investigation and an enforcement order from DEP. So they don't have to tell me anything about the permit. The contractor, I asked him for the copy of the permit and he gave it to me. So that lists all the steps that this contractor now has to do. And I want to make it clear that this contractor knew what he was doing. He did something illegal and he did something wrong. It's not, we didn't allow him to do this. He did something wrong and illegal, and it happens every day, all the time. And like the lady from DEP told me, she had 20 of them on her desk. I'm not making an excuse for it, but that's what happened. He did something illegal and wrong, and he got caught.
And to that end, Shelley, that's why this fellow right over here contacted the town twice, the week before, because he could see it happening. This young lady's husband right here, he's stayed home from work. You could see it happening. All of a sudden, they have the equipment showing up, whatever,
Yep.
and then they started up.
Sure.
And,
So what happens is normally what happens, the good contractors, the ones that do this work all the time, we've seen a ton of demolition permits, demolition of homes taking
Sure.
place in the past, 5 to 10 years with development being so busy, is that they're required to go in with a licensed asbestos contractor and see if there's asbestos in the house, have it rightfully removed, they notify DEP. We never ever have to know about it because they don't have to provide us with that because it's not under our regulatory purview. So this is all done by the good contractors out there that know what they're doing, and that's what they do. They get their odor control, they get their DEP asbestos notification done, and they do their dust mitigation. So I've been here for 21 years. This is the first time that this has ever happened, that someone did this illegally. So now, I'm not making an excuse again, I have to double check every demolition permit that comes in now and actually get physical evidence that
Yes.
this has been done on every single
Yes.
one. So for instance, yesterday I had a contractor come in with a demo permit. And I said, all right, what do you have? I go, do you have your asbestos notification form? Do you have your rodent control? Do you have your dust mitigation? He goes, yep, got it all, it's all done. Here it is. He's like, you don't have to ask me, this is what we do. So I took it for granted that all these contractors know what they're supposed to be doing. And now this one, he didn't do it. So now here you guys are paying the price.
And I hope the town, you really penalize, I don't know what you can do to this guy other than the $300 a day.
I wish I could do more.
I wish, this demolition permit, I would immediately pull that until he demonstrates that you can see the plan, because you can't let this guy go in there again and
I'd like to see the whole site dug up and see what else he's buried in the yard. Because there was somebody out in the yard that was moving stuff around before this even happened. The yard was absolutely, completely cleared. What else is under there? What else is over there?
So now I asked DEP about the immediate danger on the site, and they said, because it's under an enforcement action and under an investigation by them, the site is status quo the way that it is, it's okay. So I don't know if there's anything more that I can make him do. I think I made him do everything that I could. I asked him to put a fence up around the site. I asked him to go and speak to every one of the neighbors in the neighborhood to see if...
Nobody's spoken to me.
I've asked him to do that. So I know that he's been out there, but again, I can't make him do that because this is a shoddy contractor at best who isn't doing what he's supposed to be doing.
So can you pull his license from the town?
He doesn't, he's not licensed by the town, he's licensed by the state. He has a construction supervisor's license by the state.
Through the chair to Shelley. Shelley, now, moving forward,
Yeah.
when you get these demolition permits, you're going to be checking these? Is that what I
Like I
understand?
just said, I got one yesterday.
Right,
So
and
he
you check.
gave them all
Okay.
to me.
Now-
But, you know, they all know that they have to do this. So for him to say that he didn't know he had to do this, it's just, it's
Can
just
you,
not
can you pull this demolition permit from this individual?
I don't issue demolition permits, I'd have to refer to the building inspector.
Okay, can that be done through the building inspector?
Yeah, right.
Through-
How you doing? I'm Al Spalding. I'm your building inspector. Could I pull it? Right now with that DEP enforcement order, he can't do anything. He's stuck right there. They have a bigger fine, a bigger levy. They have more power right now to hit him in the pocketbook, which is the only way that some guys understand stuff. So for me to pull the permit, you know, I could do that, but I mean, it doesn't do anything other than, right now is under DEP jurisdiction. Board of Health has no jurisdiction over it, the building code has no jurisdiction over it, the zoning bylaws has no jurisdiction over it, your inhabitants bylaw has no jurisdiction over it, because it's not mentioned in the inhabitants or in the zoning bylaw.
Is there, I know that the town took down the Swain School and the Whitfield School, which had asbestos in it. There must be some sort of, there must have been some sort of protocol that the town had in order to do that.
That's,
to do it
at
appropriately.
that
so-
level, excuse me, Kevin, but at that level, everything's done right. Because there's all kinds of different agencies involved, you know. So this, it all comes down to the,
Unacceptable. To say there's no, this town, here's your board of, here's your, right here, this is Town of Wilmington, Board of Health, Code of Regulations. And it clearly spells out, I've highlighted if you haven't seen this, and I can, in 2 sections here, that they can't do this. We have jurisdiction that says we will enforce, it says right in here, and I'll show it to you if you haven't seen it. Well, we will enforce what's in this document, including making sure that no one, maybe I should just read this one section here. This is under environmental. It's actually called on another place. Section 11.1. Any person who places, throws, deposits, discharges, or causes to be placed, thrown, this, and I'll skip right over to the demolition materials of any kind which may be harmful to the environment or public health on any land, public, private, or into a drain system, yada, yada, in such a manner which is not approved by these or other governmental regulations. So it takes the whole EPA all the way down to DEP. In your own regulations, you can stop them, you can fine them, and this is the town. This is a DEP, this is the town. This is your regulations. You don't need to create, and this idea when we come into the office and we're just told there's nothing we can do, that is baloney. We can do a lot. You guys can do a lot if you just recognize the problem. Mr. Hull, you recognize the problem. Let's take some action here. And if we can't do something, let's make sure that we make the changes where next time we have some power here. Because we have the power. We signed the permit. To say we have no power is ludicrous.
But sir, he has been stopped, and are we finding him? Or by virtue of DEP trumping us, as it were, he's being fined?
Well, I don't know where DEP's at under.
Right, they don't tell you.
They don't have to tell me.
So if we
my
have
concern
fineable-
is, are you gonna fine him to the
I'm
point
asking the-
where he's not gonna be able to afford to continue, and this is just gonna be left open?
Ma'am, we're working on it.
So
We're
I-
having the conversation right now
If
live.
you look at my regulation, I can fine him $300.
Correct.
$300 a day?
Yes.
A day?
A day?
It says right here, it says is $300 for each violation each day constituting a separate violation.
Right.
Each day.
So it's $300 a day. Now here, this guy's got probably a few dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But it's gonna cost them, according to, I talked to the asbestos consultant, and you've gone from around 10 to 15K originally, that they had come in, packaged each tile up and then discarded. It's maybe jacked up to around $80,000 now to take that, you know, to do the work on the house. So it's gonna cost the guy some money. But the end result, I'd like to see his license removed, whatever, because there are many reputable builders around, and that's the kind of people that we want to have. And there's nothing wrong with growth and you know, you're making a few dollars.
Follow the rules.
Follow the rules.
Mr. McCoy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a quick comment, then a few questions I need to ask. Last Saturday, I bumped into Mr. Norton at Market Basket. He brought this to my attention. Unfortunately, the town hall is closed Saturday and Sunday, and I knew the manager was on vacation. So I called the manager immediately on Monday to talk to Mr. Norton, and they had a conversation. And I'm happy about that. And I'll be honest with you, I did drive down to that site because you told me where it was. And I shouldn't say this is funny, but it's sad. I picked up the phone, I called my wife, I says, you know, maybe I'm lucky, it's raining out. I'm going down exactly to that building to take a look, and it looked like a crime scene with the yellow tape all around, and you know, it is a goddamn crime scene right down there, what they did. Now I'm saying to myself, what about when it's a nice sunny day and the air's out there? These poor folks had to come across with this. And let's talk a little more. What about across the street? We spent all this money on this beautiful Yentiles farm. The kids out there playing. This thing could have went in the atmosphere. And I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but this probably could happen. And obviously you folks shouldn't be going through this. Now I just want to ask a question, and I'm hearing, did somebody come to the town hall, talk to a department head, told them about this situation prior to a demolition permit being given out? Or,
Mr. Godzik is back here.
right. I just need to know.
He was the one that wrote that article in the town crier, but he did come down and he's as frustrated as Paul.
Well, it's not about pointing fingers
Yeah.
anymore. But I don't understand why they can't be able to line item in a demo permit or a building permit, like lead paint or anything else either. You know, it's just, I mean, asbestos has been illegal since like 1975 or something. I mean, the wheels are slow, but they shouldn't have been that slow.
I understand we need a program going forward, checks and balances, but I would like us to see, we're talking about all the good developers out there, and I'm sure they are, but let me, good.
And what about all the houses that have been re-sided over, and now when you go to the assessor's office, it says aluminum siding or vinyl siding. It doesn't say vinyl siding that covers asbestos or whatever. What
I
about all
was
those
just going, I
farmhouses?
was just going to lead into that. We have a lot of homes on Lowell Street built in the early 1900s around the community, and we know, I can point, and I'm not gonna say, I know some homes that have asbestos tiles, no question, and you're right. This is what happens, you put vinyl siding over that and you don't know. But what I'm wondering about is this guy got caught, and if this happened, and he got caught, plain and simple. What I'm wondering is, and we got good developers, that's what we're hearing, I would like us to do a check over the last 5 to 10 years on any demolition permits that have been given out. And we're talking about these good folks. Now, it's gonna be very easy to find out. If you got a house built in 1920, you can sure as heck believe it's asbestos in it. And I would like to do a cross-reference with the DEP, finding out that, did this house on 11 Treasure Hill Road, I use mine, on 11 Treasure Hill Road, built 1920, permit was taken out for demolition. Should be simple enough, cross-reference, contact the DEP and said, here's a house on 11 Treasure Road, 1920, has there ever been a demolition permit taken out for asbestos? If the answer is no, then it didn't get it done. We need to do checks and balances here, folks. We need to go, I'd be happy to make a motion if that's what it takes. We need to do checks and balances over the last 5, 10 years, that's what I'm hearing, right? To see if a developer took out a demolition permit, and if they did on a rebuild, let's make it be simple enough to check with the DEP to see if they followed the paperwork.
If you go to the DEP website, and I did here, and I actually got the printout, it says, today in Wilmington, how many asbestos-related repairs are going on right now? And it pulls up, there's 6 of them. Most of them going on at Deming Way, and it tells the certified contractors that's doing it, and has to do with, like, maybe you're doing window replacements and caulking and stuff, but they're all on the website, and you could say, give me the last year, give me the last 10 years. They've come a long way in the state as far as making this information available to the different communities. And we ought to take advantage of that and do, Mike, just what you just said. We gotta do something. You guys gotta get your heads together and come up with a plan, just like the EPA. You didn't expect him to come up with all the answers here, and it takes time. But I feel like Olin Chemical is next door to me right now, and just like you said, these people have a right to water, and you're frustrated. This is not acceptable. You know, people, I didn't know, or I'm not. That's not acceptable. I have a right to clean air. I have a right to a safe place to live. Just like the guy that was in the thing driving this thing under OSHA, he has the right to a safe workplace. That's one of the basic laws in this country. OSHA, safe workplace.
Just, we had the assessor here not too long ago, and she's saying there's a lot of tear downs and they're building new homes. And I'm hearing from the past 5-10 years, there's been a lot of tear downs. Unless there's an objection, I would instruct the town manager to check these demolition permits, cross-reference it with the DEP. Should be pretty simple enough. And if someone took out a demolition permit on 11 Treasure Hill Road, that house was built in 1920. And if that builder did not go to DEP, God damn it, they should lose their license. I don't care who the developer is in this community. That's what should happen, because we have an obligation, a duty to protect these folks. Here we talk about Olin Chemical, here's these folks in this neighborhood. And if there's not an objection from this, I would instruct the town manager to do this immediately.
Well, let me ask this question, though. If we go back and look at 10 years' worth of demolition permits and find that there were, I don't know, 100 instances, whatever the number is, of cases where contractors demolished buildings that contained asbestos, where does that get us?
You know what you do? You contact the State Attorney General's office and you put it in their laps for them to enforce it, because I'm sure that they could probably do something. And if that's the case, I'm hoping that everyone's on the honor system doing it right. But if they're not doing it right, this poor SOB got caught. And that's how he was playing it. No other way he got caught, and he tried to pull the wool over someone's eyes. But if we got reputable people doing it, I hope to think we are.
I'll be saying a lot for you guys, just from this point forward. Jeff, from this point forward, we don't allow it to happen again. We can't do that. You guys have the power. This isn't complicated.
If I may, perhaps we could, I think Mr. Norton's right, we ought to bring this to the very next meeting and we review this entire process as a board. I'll admit, I'm not completely familiar with the guidelines.
They'll come in. Right, because it's really, all you're trying to do is link. They don't know about all the demolitions and stuff, but in our town, we do. They get the permit. So we have to just tie into their system, link into theirs, it's not complicated, or they will tell you, here's the form, umpty, and whatever you do, don't sign that permit until you have received that form. As Shelley pointed out, if you ask the good builders, they can produce the form. And it solves the problem.
You learn a lot from Olin Chemical. It's called environmental justice. Well, we need environmental justice here. And the manager's asking, well, what do we do? Give it to the Attorney General's office. Give it to her and let her decide what's the fate of this. Maybe they find these individuals. Maybe they'll find nothing. But if they do find something, well, there's a thing called checks and balances. We need to move forward right now to make sure this never happens again. But we should still take a look in the past to see cross-reference. That is so easy.
I filed a complaint with DEP, and I know Lori has filed a complaint with the Mass Attorney General's office over this, what's happened here. But given that, like I said, it's already happened, we have to prevent this from happening again. It's all like, if you could do that.
It's already done.
I'd like to make a comment too, if I can.
I'm going to come to you in just a moment. I know my colleagues want to speak, and Ed, you had been waiting your turn, so please.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. Hull, Doug and Kathleen Moore are very close to me. Doug was in my wedding and I was in his. She texted me the day that this was going on, and Jeff was on vacation. By the time I got back to Kat, the DP was already on site. And Doug Moore, her husband, is one of the best builders that I've ever known. So what he says, in my eyes, is God when it comes to building. Gospel, I should say. He took the day off from work that day because he knew what was going to happen. And I can remember going by the house when Yelto Park was being opened. I parked in front of that house because we thought we were going to have a parking issue. Okay? And they were concerned then. And the gentleman that spoke earlier did come down to town hall twice and got.
It was once, a phone call and once.
And, okay, sorry. So then, and didn't get the answers that he expected. And then someone, and I'm not sure where, because this was, of course, on social media, looked up on our own website and found out that the house had asbestos. And we still signed the permit. There was a mistake. There should never, ever be a mistake again. End of story. Like Mr. Norton said, let's learn from this, and we need to learn from this. And I am going to be on top of this, because I need to account to Kat and Doug Moore, who have 3 beautiful children, all and one's at the Tech. One tried out for your basketball team. So, they mean a lot to me. And this subject means a lot to me. And we need to make people accountable so it does not happen again. And on top of asbestos, lead is another one. We need to have a, because there are houses being torn down on a very regular basis in town. There was one on Wilson Street not too long ago, right after this happened. My sister-in-law, when I was talking about what Kat and Doug were talking about, she had a hissy fit because that house was from the 1920s. And it could have been asbestos. She didn't know. And by the time her husband got home, and by the time I learned, it was all gone. That's how fast these houses come down. And if Doug wasn't there that day, that house would have been gone. And that's not right. They shouldn't be living through this. No one in this room should be living through this. And it needs to be fixed. And Shelley and Al have told us that it is fixed. And I'm just saying, it better be. It has to be. Not that it better be, it has to be. Because the next house, and the next house, and the next house are most likely gonna have asbestos, because it's the old houses that are being torn down, that are small, and like this house was. It's not a huge house, but it's big enough where the asbestos affected Mr. Norton's grandchildren. And that's important to all of us. And it needs to be taken care of. I can't stress it enough. Thank you.
Greg, did you say you wanted to say? I can't remember if I thought it's already handled, yeah, so forgive me.
Yeah, no,
Oh, I'm sorry, was it you,
Mr. Norton,
Kevin?
I certainly understand your frustration. And I agree with you. I think we should move forward. And I think the issue is to resolve this now, you know, and to encapsulate it. I don't know what that details, what that means. I'm not a professional in that regard. I don't know if, Shelley, have you instituted the fine yet on this
No.
individual?
I'm tallying it up.
Okay, because
There
I'm
will
figuring
be a fine.
if the encapsulation, that fine can be applied to that, you know, if that's possible. I don't know how much that is or what that costs. I know, as I said, we've done work to eliminate the Whitfield School and the Swain School, so maybe those companies that were dealt with can give an idea of the cost of enclosing that area. My concern is what they've buried, that someone had mentioned. Maybe they've buried something in there. Will DEP look at that? Will you ask them to look at that? But
I've asked them, and
this is
again,
just
it's
unacceptable.
under an active investigation by DEP.
That's all you get.
And in order for me to get anything from them, I have to put in a formal public records request when the investigation is over.
Okay.
So again, they have their timeline. So their permit got approved by DEP with some conditions on it. So for instance, now the licensed asbestos contractor that they have hired to go out there to do what they were supposed to do at the beginning goes out there to start what he's supposed to do, start the work. We don't even have to be notified that when he's going to do it.
Do we know who it is? We don't
No.
even know who it is.
Nope. I don't need to, no one needs to tell me that. So, for instance, they could be out there tomorrow and I wouldn't know unless someone told me, unless I
By
keep
the
checking.
law, they're supposed to post on the building. They actually
Right.
get remind me of a sticker that I give my kids, but they actually get an approval thing that says they can commence the work. And it has to be there 10 days before they actually start the work.
Right. I haven't seen that there yet. Have you guys seen that there?
No.
Right.
I watch that property close because, you know, I don't want anybody to want it. I don't want to see the kids, and that's why the fence was a good idea, because the kids, they go over there and they're nosy and they don't realize that this stuff is all over the place. But there's ways of seeing before they actually start. That's what should have happened originally. There should have been this approval sticker posted on that building 10 days prior to the actual start of the asbestos removal. You got to do that first, and then you do the demolition. And it has to, as you said, it has to be by a certified contractor. And that contractor, because you're trying to contain that stuff in this environment, would then probably encapsulate it. And they, I talked to the consultant, they're going to put some monitors around there to see if there's any spread of the contaminants around there. You guys, you gotta get in a room and just kind of come up with a plan and say, and really look at this plan. And you oughta, one of the things, I worked at Raytheon for 40 years, you know, doing Patriot missiles, going all over the world, doing things. And, well, we had a thing called Six Sigma. And what happens is we get all the parties, we would, when it's appropriate, we get Shelley, you get the DEP, you get everybody kind of together and say, hey, if we did this, would this take care of the problem?
It's already done, we already did it.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not telling you how to do your job, but, you know, just, you can do this. So,
Mr. Spalding indicated he wanted to have a word, please.
I just want to clear something up with the board, that this was like a perfect storm. Shelley was on vacation. I took that one Wednesday. He got his permit signed on Tuesday. I had taken Wednesday off. That's just how the perfect storm ended. Shelley wasn't there. I wasn't there. I was notified. I was 150 miles away. There was no way that we could have just went down there and stopped the job. So it's not like we were lax about it. It just was just the way it happened. I mean, then DEP got involved. I met Mr. Norton at 8:30 in the morning when I came in Thursday. I was talking to him as I was learning about the procedures that went on that day. So, I mean, it wasn't like anything that we were being lax about it. It just all fell in place all at one time.
Well, let me just add, with all due respect, the problem is we did not have a process in place. I mean, I've talked to some of my colleagues in the neighboring towns. Most of them, if not all of them, that I've consulted with, and I guess a half a dozen at this point, all have a process where the contractor is supposed to provide certain information with respect to asbestos. We didn't have that process, and shame on us. We were going on the honor system, and unfortunately we got taken advantage of. And it's not going to happen again. It's not going to happen again. I had a conversation with Shelley and Al Spalding. I think it was the day after I talked to you, Mr. Norton. We went through the process. I told them what I expect. I don't care what went on in the past in terms of not being our responsibility. It is our responsibility. If we get a call and there's an issue that is not legally within our jurisdiction, I expect that we as a town, whether it's me or any department head, is going to get that information to the appropriate department and be responsive. The idea that because I'm not legally responsible is unacceptable to me. And I believe I've made that clear, and I do not expect this problem to happen again. I expect that we will have a process that is going to include information on the demolition permit as to what they're supposed to do. And even, I think, it goes beyond just having a checklist, because in my estimation, I don't want to rely on somebody saying, I'll check that box and hope they don't check. They're going to have to provide information, whether it's some kind of an affidavit that the asbestos removal plan has been authorized by DEP. I'm expecting that we're going to have not just a checklist, but the backup to that checklist, that somebody has documented that what they tell us they've done is being done.
Jeff, there's two pieces of paper. You get that affidavit you're talking about, but they also provide you another one that says when they dispose it, there's only one certified site, disposal site in Massachusetts that will take asbestos. So they also have to have approval from that site that when it leaves the premise, they're authorized to put it in that site. So there's two pieces of paper that you kind of need to make sure things are done right.
So a couple of things are coming out of this, I feel like. Jeff, I would appreciate, I don't know if my colleagues agree, but I would appreciate for our next meeting if you could present us with a summary or a draft of this new procedure and what that boils down to, that the staff will be asked to follow going forward, so that we can feel, so we can be witness to it and feel like we have something that we can endorse, I'm confident that it'll be sufficient. And secondly, you know, Shelley, I know you're working hard with DEP and trying to communicate with them, but, you know, solving for the future and making sure it never happens again doesn't fix the fact that they have a pile of crap next to their houses. And what can we do? Is it a matter of, is it Representative Maselli, Representative Gordon? If DEP, excuse me, Ms. Norton, let me just finish if I may. If DEP is a state agency, maybe we need to get our state legislators involved. Because if Town Hall can't get the bandwidth or get an answer out of a state agency, maybe our state legislators can get an answer, or maybe get action. I don't know. I'm not trying to create controversy, but they deserve to have a response as to what is going to happen and when. And I think they're not asking too much. Yeah, Ed.
Shelley, you said you had a copy of the list of conditions for the permit. Is that something you can share with us and the neighbors? Please?
Oh, you mean right?
No, not now. If you could email it to me, I'll get it to Kat.
Mr. Lingenfelter, I'm sorry, I forgot about you there.
George Lingenfelter, 11 Concord Street. I feel very sorry for these people, and I go for them. I know a lot about this. I actually used to work with asbestos back in the 80s. My comment relates to my own problems, though, which is exactly why this happens to these people. I think your town has mismanaged the building department for years. In 2012, they issued a building permit. They changed the pitch of a chicken coop, and they built a 52 by 24-foot commercial building, and they wouldn't stop construction on it. 9 days later, they finally did, after I dealt with Mr. Ho and Mr. Spalding, they did. And then the neighbor that was building the building took a run at me with a pickup truck in my front yard, and the police would do freaking nothing about it. I take a picture of the people, and they call the cops on me for taking a picture of them.
George.
No, I'm just saying that
I know
you're responsible for this because of the way you manage this town. That was a perfect storm. In my case, nobody got hurt because they screwed up the permits. I went to the building Board of Appeals and prevailed. And they had to retrofit the building, and it doesn't conform to zoning, got a separate power meter on it. It's the way you guys run the town that caused this problem.
Okay, thank you for your
There was a
opinions.
lot of years coming. Just this time, people got hurt. Before, it was just me costing money, and you're all responsible as a town government for these people's problems because of the way you run the town. I think that the building department needs to be totally revamped to how they do things. And all the town, including Mr. Hull, Mrs. Spalding, I'm not sure about Shelley's involvement, it needs to be revamped, and you're all responsible because you knew it was coming. At this time, people got hurt.
Your opinions are noted. Thank you, George. Okay. Yeah, please, I'm sorry.
I have another question.
Yeah.
How is our health affected? How is the health of Dave's grandkids, which are David's children?
It's long-term chronic exposure to friable asbestos materials. You inhale it and it scars your lungs up if you inhale enough.
So, is there a medical facility that we should go to and get checked? Thank you for that, sir.
I know a lot about it. I could rant and rave and give you scientific facts. I'm a college educator. I actually used to work with asbestos. These people screwed up and they shouldn't be working here. And most of you guys shouldn't be on the board. And I brought a lot of these complaints to the town. Mr. Loud threatened the police with me. You guys are a bunch of idiots, I think.
George, you're not welcome in this room.
I understand.
You don't get
That's
to call
why I
us
call the
that.
police
You don't
on
get to
me.
use that kind of language. Your opinions are noted, but you don't get to talk to us
Well, I
like
try
that.
to be polite and then they get railroaded. I
You
just
didn't
spent a
try
lot
to
of money
be.
in court.
That
I
wasn't
get a
trying to
verdict
be
from the
polite. You're
first
excused.
project.
Thanks for your attendance tonight. Shelley, do you have any education or knowledge about this asbestos exposure that you can share, or is this information that you can gather perhaps from official sources and provide them with some understanding of what's happening? Could I ask you to do that?
Sure.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I certainly have no knowledge of what exposure this represents. My brain tells me it's long-term exposure, that it's the primary concern, but I probably read that somewhere. So I'm going to ask Shelley, as our Director of Public Health, to gather information and communicate with you in hopes that assuages some concerns. At the same time, we're going to rattle every saber we have to get the site sealed and cleaned, and we're going to solve the problem so it doesn't happen again. I think that's the best that we can do, at least. I'm sorry, go ahead, Greg.
And also, to Mr. Loud's point, in keeping us informed, but also could we have the same correspondence to the neighbors? They should be informed on everything that goes.
I can give you my email, whenever you have information, that'd be great.
And can we make sure that the whole site is looked at? Is there some way that we can make sure that the entire site is looked at, not just this asbestos? Because I think there's something else shady there.
Right.
Al? I don't, ma'am, do I know your first name?
My name is Laurie.
Laurie. I will personally go down there and make sure that you're with me. You point what you want dug up, and I'll make sure Jonathan digs it up for you. Okay?
Thank you, Al.
Through the chair, to Shelley. I know that the maximum extent of the fine that we're allowed to impose upon this contractor, if you even want to call him a contractor, is $300 that you're adding up per day. Is that something that you have the authority to apply to this person, or do you need us to take a formal vote
No,
to have that happen? Okay.
No. I have the regulatory authority under my regs to do that.
Okay. Are you planning to do that?
I am, yeah. I have been planning all along. I've just been, instead of giving him, a ticket a day, I'm just waiting till the end and give him one ticket.
Is he aware of that?
He is now.
He is now. His name's Jonathan Langoni, by the way, in case anyone wants to know.
We're on it. We're on it. I wish we could magically make it have not happened, but we're working on it. Thank you all for coming here tonight.
So who do we give our email addresses to for contact info?
Well, we should reach out to them.
If you want to, you can even
ask you to put
use
on the back
the
of
back of that if you care to, and,
I have Kat's email address.
sure.
This is a two-sided.
I got some paper here for you.
Yeah, pick anyone. If you can either leave it there or give it to Shelley on the way out. Folks, we're still in meeting here, so we're going to continue on with now new business, items that are not reasonably anticipated by me 48 hours in advance of this meeting. If it's all right, I'll start down to my left with Mr. Loud.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of things. You never go to me first.
Do you want me to come back?
No. First, like I started a couple months ago, meetings, I want to recognize a couple of our veterans, and on a day like today, which is a special day to me, on 9/11 in 2001, what happened. I know that we've all seen all the memorials that were done today, from the president to the governor, to what happened to Logan Airport. And it is late in the day, but I did want to recognize that was a special day. I know exactly where I was on 9/11 in 2001, and I knew exactly on that same day that I found out that my brother-in-law was at the Pentagon. So it's the reason why I wore the American flag tie today, because it's a special day to me. It always has been and always will be. But continuing on that, we lost Zach Mayo, who was a Navy corpsman and a longtime resident of Wilmington through the high school. He lost his battle with PTSD. He had a very tough deployment in Afghanistan. He was a great kid, and he will be missed, and a shout out to his parents. The next veteran that I'd like to thank for his service is Paul Flaherty. He's the owner with his family of Flaherty Jewelries in the Plaza. He's in the Army National Guard. He's currently at Fort Drum getting training to be deployed overseas for about a year. Flaherty's jewelry is being held down by his father. So there's a shout out to the two veterans that I would like to talk to about. But also, you heard the chairman say thank you to Mr. Norton. I did out in the parking lot for his service. You have no idea when you say thank you to a veteran what it means to them. I am either fortunate or unfortunate. I travel quite often for work, and the last time I was at Logan Airport, there was a whole group of ladies and gentlemen, and I thanked every one of them, and they hugged me, because they don't get that often, and it's a shame that we should be thanking a veteran every time we see them. But also on a day like today on 9/11, we need to be thanking our first responders, even our local first responders. We have a great fire department, and in my opinion, a great police department, and like I said, a great fire department. We need to thank them too. So that's all I really had to say today. I know we're getting to the important dates, which are some fun events coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ed, well said. I'll just be quick. I'm not one of these individuals that's known as a Johnny-come-lately. Relative to Global, I'll be totally honest. I had some personal issues where I couldn't go to that meeting, but I had all intentions of going to the September 5th meeting, joining up and supporting the residents opposed to Global. I just want to make that clear. And I have talked to the Tebow family, the Boylan family, the Saran family, the Lyman family, the Downs family, the Anderson family over the last 30-plus days. And so I'm just making my position clear where I stand, and just thought I'd say that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. McCoy. Mr. Carr?
Yeah, I was not at the last meeting, so I didn't have an opportunity to wish the students and the teachers well and to have a successful year.
Well
That's
said.
all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bend?
Thank you. I echo Mr. Loud's comments in regards to the veterans. Thank you. One thing I would like to perhaps bring to the board that we could discuss at a future meeting is the ways that we can improve our communication between the town and the residents. I think we all can agree there's a lot going on right now in the town, and I feel like some of the times stuff gets miscued. I feel like we ought to do a better job of trying to get the facts out there, have a way that residents can reach us a little bit better. I note that in Billerica just last month, they launched a new section on their website, which is the residents can, voice their feedback and get questions answered a lot quicker. That's just one suggestion that I might have. I think we ought to bring it up to a discussion here. I don't have the answers tonight, but ways that we can, I feel like obviously our information is posted, it's public, people can reach out to us at any time, which I urge them to do. But I feel like we can do a better job of getting information out. I know we live in a world where information is going out every half a second. And I just feel like we could do a better job. I know the town puts out they have emails, they do tweets. I just feel like that we got to find a way for folks to be able to A, communicate with us, their concerns, and B, get information out there in a more timely manner. And so I hope we could have this discussion in the near future.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to have that discussion. I'm reacting in my head to some of what you're saying, and I'm not going to. I guess I'm not going to have the conversation now. So I'll look forward to the opportunity to dig deeper, and we'll schedule it at a time appropriate and over the course of the next couple of scheduled meetings. So, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that for now. In terms of new business, the only thing I really want to say, and Mr. Hull's going to talk about important dates, but one of the particular important dates that I hope that residents will pay attention to and carve out some time for is the town cleanup day on the 23rd. It's incumbent upon all of us to take care of our community. We certainly have a DPW and we have staff that take care of our parks and pick up the trash on our main roads, but along the trails and along around the lake and so many other areas, just they become magnets for debris and litter. So on the 23rd, it's a grand opportunity for young folks to work with the parents or to work with civic groups like the Scouts, or to gain volunteer points or hours for high school, whatever. It's just a super opportunity for young and old to get out and be a part of the community and help clean it up. So I hope to see a good contingent of folks there. That's all I have from new business. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind going over important dates.
Sure. Important dates. Through October 29, the Farmers Market continues. Town Common Parking Lot, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. September 17th is the Chamber of Commerce Half Marathon and 5K Run Walk. September 23rd is the Shredding Day, Municipal Parking Lot, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. September 23rd, Annual Town Cleanup is noted. Meet at the DPW, 135 Andover Street, 8 a.m. to noon. September 25, Board of Selectmen's meeting here, room 9, 7 p.m. September 30, Mass Memories Roadshow, Wilmington High School Cafeteria, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. October 5th, Candlelight Vigil, Town Common, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. October 9, town offices will be closed for Columbus Day. October 10 is the Board of Selectmen's meeting, room 9, 7 p.m. October 13, Carter Lecture Fund, The Singing Trooper, Wilmington Middle School, 7 p.m. And then October 16th, the Welcome to Wilmington reception, Memorial Library, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.
Thank you, Jeff. That is the business of the evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Made and seconded, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.